Hey guys. Tonight we begin with a title that sounds glorious and feels like a curse. Being royal in ancient Rome means waking up powerful and going to sleep paranoid. You live surrounded by gold, guarded by soldiers, and stalked by expectations you never agreed to. Your childhood ends early, your privacy never begins, and your family tree looks suspiciously like a crime scene. The city cheers for your name while quietly betting on your downfall. This is a world where love is strategic, loyalty is temporary, and survival requires constant performance. Rome calls this destiny. You call it another long day. So before you get too cozy, take a second to gently tap that new hype button YouTube just added. It really does help little guys like me push through the algorithm. And be sure to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy this strange little corner of quiet storytelling. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's strangely comforting to know who else is drifting off with us around the world. Now, get comfortable, let the day melt away, and we'll drift back together into the quiet corners of the past. You are born into marble, noise, and expectation, which is a strange way to begin existence if you think about it. Most people start life screaming in a quiet room with a few relatives panicking nearby. You start life screaming in a palace where the walls echo, servants pretend not to notice, and someone immediately starts calculating what you might cost or earn the family in the next 20 years. The marble floor is cold, the air smells like incense and polished stone, and the first thing you learn is that privacy is a myth told to other people. Your cradle is carved, your blankets are dyed expensive colors, and none of it belongs to you. Even as an infant, you are public property. Midwives whisper, courtiers hover. Somewhere down a corridor, a relative you will one day distrust nods politely and files your existence away for later consideration. You do not know it yet, but your birth has already annoyed at least 3 people and made 2 others briefly hopeful. This is what passes for celebration in Rome. As you grow, the noise never stops. Sandals slap stone floors from dawn to dusk. Messengers arrive breathless with news that does not concern you but will someday ruin your sleep. Slaves argue quietly about schedules while pretending you are not listening. You learn early that silence means something is wrong. A quiet palace is never peaceful. It is waiting. Your nursery is staffed better than most homes in the city. You have tutors before you have opinions. They teach you letters, numbers, and the correct way to hold yourself so that even standing still looks authoritative. You are praised for sitting calmly while adults discuss matters like taxes, executions, and whether someone deserves to continue breathing in the empire. You do not understand the words yet, but you understand the tone. Everything is serious, and everything somehow involves you. Affection exists, but it arrives with conditions. A kiss on the forehead is followed by a reminder to behave. A smile lingers just long enough to be seen by others. You learn that love in the palace is often a performance, and like all performances in Rome, it is carefully choreographed. When someone hugs you too tightly, you wonder who is watching. When someone ignores you, you wonder why. Meals are events. You sit at tables long before your feet reach the floor, surrounded by dishes you are not allowed to touch and conversations you are not allowed to interrupt. Food appears endlessly, yet eating feels optional. What matters is posture, patience, and not making the wrong face when a relative across the table stops smiling mid-sentence. You learn to chew quietly and listen loudly. The furniture is magnificent and deeply unhelpful. Chairs are designed to impress, not support. Beds are enormous, but never fully restful. Everything around you looks powerful and feels slightly uncomfortable, which turns out to be an excellent metaphor for your future. You sleep beneath painted ceilings depicting gods doing things they would absolutely deny if asked directly. You wake up every day beneath the weight of history you did not volunteer for. People call you lucky. You hear it constantly. Lucky to be born into wealth. lucky to have servants, lucky to never worry about bread. What they mean is that you will never worry about small things. Instead, you will worry about large, shapeless threats that wear familiar faces. You will worry about succession, alliances, and whether your presence is still useful. You will worry quietly, because worrying loudly is considered a weakness. You notice early that children like you disappear. One day a cousin is there, learning letters beside you, and the next day no one mentions their name again. When you ask, an adult clears their throat and tells you that life is complicated. This is Roman for stop asking questions if you enjoy breathing. You nod, file the information away, and learn that survival includes selective curiosity. Outside the palace, the city roars. Rome never whispers. Crowds cheer, argue, riot, and celebrate all within the same afternoon. You are taken to public appearances where people shout your name as if they know you. They smile, wave, and sometimes glare. You wave back because you are taught that waving costs nothing and buys time. Even as a child, you understand that the crowd loves the idea of you more than the reality. At night, when the corridors finally quiet down, you lie awake listening to distant footsteps and closer thoughts. You begin to understand that being born royal does not mean being born safe. It means being born visible. You cannot disappear into anonymity or grow unnoticed. Every mistake will echo louder than it deserves. Every success will belong to someone else. You fall asleep surrounded by luxury and wake up surrounded by expectations. Rome has claimed you, wrapped you in marble, and handed you a lifetime of inherited stress with better furniture. You are not yet powerful, but you are already involved. And in this city, involvement is rarely optional and never simple. Your childhood tutors arrive before you fully understand what childhood is supposed to feel like. They come armed with scrolls, opinions, and the quiet terror of men who know a wrong lesson could shorten their life expectancy. Philosophy begins early. You are taught to ask what virtue means, why power exists, and whether truth matters more than survival. No one says the obvious answer out loud, but you hear it anyway, humming beneath every lecture like an unwanted instrument. Rhetoric follows soon after. Because in Rome, thinking is nice, but speaking convincingly is how you stay alive. You learn how to argue without committing, how to praise without promising, and how to answer questions without actually answering them. Your tutors insist this is intellectual discipline. You begin to suspect it is verbal camouflage. When you successfully explain both sides of an argument without revealing your own view, they nod with something that looks like pride and feels like relief. You sit for hours practicing speeches you will never give, defending laws that do not exist yet, and condemning imaginary rivals who suspiciously resemble real people. Your voice is corrected constantly. Too soft sounds weak. Too loud sounds reckless. Confidence must be measured precisely, like poison. Enough to impress, never enough to alarm. You repeat phrases until they feel empty, which your tutors assure you is the point. Philosophy lessons drift from Plato to Stoicism to long discussions about fate, duty, and the universe's apparent indifference to human plans. The irony is thick enough to chew. You are taught that external events should not disturb you, while simultaneously being reminded that a single rumor could destroy your future. Calm, you are told, is a virtue. Panic, however, is a luxury you are not allowed to indulge in publicly. Then there is the unspoken curriculum, the one no scroll ever mentions, the vital skill of not trusting anyone who smiles too warmly. You learn it slowly, through observation rather than instruction. The tutor who flatters you excessively is usually trying to be remembered later. The servant who laughs too eagerly at your jokes is listening for something useful. Even praise becomes suspicious, especially praise. You notice patterns. Genuine smiles appear briefly and disappear quickly. Long smiles linger because they want something. Compliments often arrive before requests. Sympathy often arrives before betrayal. Your tutors never explain this directly. They simply pause when someone is mentioned, raise an eyebrow, or clear their throat in a way that suggests a warning wrapped in etiquette. One tutor in particular enjoys asking trick questions. Not questions with wrong answers, but questions with dangerous ones. What makes a good ruler? Should mercy outweigh justice? Is loyalty owed to blood or to Rome? You learn to answer carefully, threading the needle between sounding thoughtful and sounding harmless. The tutor smiles politely when you succeed, which immediately makes you suspicious of him too. Your days become structured rituals of learning and watching. You read texts while watching expressions. You memorize arguments while memorizing who agrees too quickly. Education in the palace is less about knowledge and more about awareness. By the time you can quote philosophers, you can also sense tension in a room before anyone speaks. Humor exists, but it is dry, quiet, and never reckless. Jokes are told sideways, disguised as observations. Laughter is brief and often followed by silence, as if everyone is checking to see whether it was allowed. You learn to laugh softly, just enough to signal humanity, never enough to draw attention. Sometimes, a tutor disappears, not dramatically. No announcement, no explanation. One day, a familiar voice is replaced by a new one, and everyone pretends this is normal. You do the same. This is another lesson. Continuity is optional. Adaptation is mandatory. You begin to understand that intelligence in Rome is not measured by how much you know, but by how little you reveal. Your tutors reward restraint. The best student is not the one who dazzles the room, but the one who leaves people uncertain. Uncertainty creates space. Space creates survival. At night, fragments of lessons echo in your mind. Philosophical arguments blur with rhetorical techniques and unspoken warnings. You realize that the most important thing you are learning has nothing to do with virtue or logic. It is how to stay pleasant while staying guarded. By the time your lessons end each day, you are exhausted in a way that has nothing to do with reading or writing. Your mind feels sharpened and slightly bruised. You are becoming articulate, thoughtful, and carefully incomplete. Rome is shaping you into someone who can speak beautifully, think deeply, and trust almost no one. Your tutors call this education. You call it preparation. You discover this truth slowly, the way Rome prefers to teach lessons. No announcement, no lecture, just a series of moments that refuse to add up any other way. Affection in the imperial household exists, but it behaves strangely. It arrives late, leaves early, and always seems to know who is watching. A hand on your shoulder during a crowded gathering feels reassuring until you realize it tightens slightly when an important senator turns to look. A compliment about your intelligence sounds sincere until it is repeated, word for word, to a visiting ally the next day. You begin to notice that affection here does not float freely. It is weighed, timed, and often delivered in public. Family members are especially skilled at this. A relative praises you lavishly one week, inviting you to sit closer at meals, laughing a bit louder at your comments. The next week, when a political wind shifts, that warmth cools into polite distance. Nothing dramatic, just less eye contact, fewer invitations, a subtle rearranging of seating. Rome does not punish abruptly unless it wants a message to spread quickly. You start to understand that love here is rarely unconditional. It is conditional in a way that feels refined, almost elegant. If you behave correctly, you are cherished. If you remain useful, you are valued. If you stop being either, affection does not turn to hatred. It simply evaporates. Servants participate too, though not by choice. Some are genuinely kind, risking small kindnesses like extra food or quiet warnings. Others learn quickly which side of the household is currently favored and adjust their warmth accordingly. You cannot blame them. Survival sharpens everyone in Rome. Even kindness learns to negotiate. You test this reality without meaning to. A minor mistake, nothing catastrophic. A comment spoken too openly. A hesitation when confidence was expected. The response is immediate and subtle. Conversations shorten, smiles flatten. Someone who used to greet you warmly now nods instead. You feel it like a draft through a closed room. It becomes clear that affection is not about who you are. It is about what you represent and what you might represent later. Your future self casts a longer shadow than your present one. People are kind to the version of you they hope will exist. They are distant to the version they fear. You begin to catalog gestures the way merchants catalog goods. Praise offered publicly carries different weight than praise whispered privately. Gifts are never just gifts. A book means education. A ring means alliance. An invitation means expectation. Refusing anything is rude. Accepting everything is dangerous. Even parental affection follows these rules. Warmth is genuine, but it is also strategic. You are guided gently toward behaviors that benefit the household. Pride is expressed when you perform well in front of others. Disappointment is expressed quietly, behind closed doors, where it can hurt without witnesses. You are loved, but you are also an investment. There are moments when the mask slips. Late at night, in quiet corridors, someone speaks to you without calculation, a tired smile, a hand that does not linger. These moments feel precious because they are rare. You treasure them, and then you learn not to rely on them. Rome punishes reliance. You watch others fail to understand this system. A cousin believes affection means safety. A distant aunt mistakes praise for protection. Their surprise when favor fades is brief and deeply inconvenient. You learn from them. You always learn from them. Humor survives here, but it is careful humor. Jokes test boundaries. Laughter measures alignment. If a joke lands well, it means you are still acceptable. If it does not, it means you should stop talking. You become good at laughing at yourself, just enough to appear harmless. Over time, you stop expecting affection to be spontaneous. You stop seeking it for comfort. You begin to treat it like weather. Pleasant when it appears, dangerous when it shifts, never something you control. This does not make you cold. It makes you attentive. The most unsettling realization arrives quietly. You understand that you are learning to do the same thing. You offer warmth where it helps. You withdraw it where it complicates. You smile at people whose presence strengthens your position and nod politely to those who do not. You do not feel cruel. You feel prepared. This is how Rome reproduces itself, not through bloodlines alone, but through habits. Affection becomes a language of leverage, spoken fluently by everyone inside the palace walls, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Public appearances begin long before you feel prepared for them, which is exactly the point. Rome does not wait for comfort. You are dressed carefully, layers arranged to signal dignity without arrogance, simplicity without weakness. Someone adjusts your clothing one last time, not for your sake, but for the crowd's. You step forward into noise that hits like heat. Thousands of voices blend into a single living thing, loud, curious, impatient. You are taught to walk slowly, even when your instincts want to rush. Calm is not something you feel. Calm is something you perform. Your face becomes a practiced balance of approachability and distance, the expression that says, "I see you, and I am not threatened by you." This expression is rehearsed more thoroughly than any speech. It must survive cheers, silence, and the occasional shout that sounds suspiciously like a curse. The crowd watches everything. How you stand, how you breathe, how quickly you smile. They notice if your hand trembles or if your eyes dart too much. You learn to keep your gaze steady, sweeping gently over faces without lingering. Lingering suggests favoritism. Avoiding eye contact suggests fear. Somewhere in the middle is safety. You wave because waving is required. The motion is simple, but the meaning is layered. It says recognition. It says generosity. It says I am here and you are seen, even if neither of us believes it completely. You wave until your arm aches and your smile stiffens. No one asks if you are tired. Tired is irrelevant. Some days the crowd loves you. You can feel it in the way cheers rise easily, in the warmth that rolls forward like a tide. Flowers are thrown. Children are lifted so they can see you. Someone shouts your name with genuine affection. On those days, calm feels almost natural. You begin to understand why people chase this feeling. It is intoxicating in a quiet, dangerous way. Other days, the crowd is undecided. The cheers come late, scattered, polite. People watch instead of celebrate. You sense questions moving through them like whispers. Is this one strong enough? Is this one necessary? Is this one temporary? You hold your expression steady and your posture tall, even as the uncertainty presses in. Then there are the days when affection curdles. The noise shifts. It becomes sharp, restless. A cheer here, a mutter there. Someone boos, someone else laughs. The sound does not overwhelm you, but it teaches you something important. Love and resentment live close together in Rome. They share the same streets and sometimes the same voice. You are never allowed to respond, not with words, not with expression. Your role is to absorb and continue. You learn to listen without reacting, to let the sound wash over you without letting it inside. This is not emotional strength. It is practiced neutrality. The elders call this leadership training. They say exposure builds resilience. What it actually builds is control. Control over your face, your body, your impulses. You learn how to appear unbothered while your heart recalibrates its rhythm. You learn how to bow just enough to acknowledge without submitting. You learn how to leave the stage at the right moment before admiration fades or hostility sharpens. Between appearances, people congratulate you. They say you did well. They say the crowd responded favorably. They analyze applause like augurs reading entrails. You listen politely and store the information away. You are learning how the city breathes. Sometimes, in quieter moments, you notice individuals in the crowd. An old man watching with narrowed eyes, a woman smiling too brightly, a soldier who does not cheer at all. You wonder which of them will matter later. Rome has a habit of remembering faces. Public rituals follow you everywhere. Games, ceremonies, festivals, each one another rehearsal. You stand beside figures whose names carry weight, matching their stillness, copying their gestures. You learn when to speak and when silence earns more approval. You learn that timing is everything. A smile too early looks eager. A smile too late looks dismissive. Humor helps, but only a little. A well-placed light remark can ease tension, but humor is a blade that cuts both ways. You use it sparingly, like salt, enough to flavor, never enough to draw attention. By the time you return to the palace, the noise still hums in your ears. The quiet inside feels unreal, fragile. You remove the ceremonial clothing and feel lighter immediately, though the weight remains. The crowd has seen you. It has judged you. It will remember you. Sometimes kindly, sometimes not. You lie awake later, replaying faces and sounds, wondering which reactions were genuine and which were rehearsed. You understand now that public love is never permanent, and public resentment is never fully asleep. And tomorrow, you will step back out again, calm on your face, while Rome decides what it thinks of you this time. Family dinners look comforting from a distance. Long tables, polished silver, carefully arranged dishes, and enough food to feed a neighborhood that will never be invited. Up close, you realize it is not a meal so much as a negotiation with bread. Everyone arrives dressed for impression rather than comfort, and everyone sits according to rules that shift often enough to keep you alert. Where you are placed matters more than what you are served. Conversation begins politely. Compliments are exchanged like ceremonial offerings. Someone praises your posture. Someone else remarks on how quickly you are growing, which is Roman, for we are watching you closely. You thank them with a practiced smile, already aware that praise here is never free. Every compliment carries a receipt that will be presented later. The food arrives in waves, rich and excessive, yet no one eats enthusiastically. Eating too much looks indulgent, eating too little looks suspicious. You learn to take measured bites, nod thoughtfully, and pause at the right moments so your chewing never interrupts something important. Someone across the table is always speaking with intent, even if the words sound harmless. A relative compliments your recent appearance at a public event. Their tone is warm, but their eyes flick briefly toward another guest. You understand immediately. The compliment is not for you. It is for the witness. You respond graciously, because responding poorly would be remembered longer than the praise itself. Stories are told. Old victories are revisited. Failures are described delicately, framed as misunderstandings or unfortunate timing. Names are mentioned casually and then dropped, like stones into water, to see who reacts. You learn to keep your expression neutral when you hear a name that matters. Reacting too much suggests attachment. Reacting too little suggests opposition. Laughter rises at predictable points. It never lingers. Humor at the table is cautious, designed to test alignment rather than create joy. A joke lands, and everyone glances around to see who laughs. You laugh softly, at the correct moment, never first and never last. This too is a skill. Affection appears briefly, strategically. A hand touches your shoulder during a compliment. A parent beams with pride when you speak well. These moments feel real and rehearsed at the same time. You accept them without leaning into them. Leaning suggests expectation. Expectation is dangerous. Disagreements surface disguised as concern. Someone worries aloud about the future. Someone wonders whether certain alliances are still wise. The words are gentle. The meaning is sharp. You listen carefully, because what is not said matters more than what is. Silence is often the loudest participant at the table. Servants move efficiently, refilling cups and clearing plates. They hear everything. Everyone knows they hear everything. This changes nothing. Rome thrives on being overheard. It creates plausible deniability. No one ever remembers exactly what was said, only what was implied. You notice patterns. Praise tends to precede requests. Concern often precedes withdrawal. When someone compliments your intelligence, they are usually preparing to disagree with you later. When someone praises your restraint, they are checking whether you will continue to practice it. The meal stretches on. Dishes change. Positions remain fixed. The conversation drifts toward broader topics. The state of the city, the mood of the people, the loyalty of the army. None of it is abstract. Everything connects back to individuals at the table, including you. You are learning how power speaks when it pretends to relax. At one point, someone offers you advice framed as affection. They speak of caution, of patience, of knowing when to step forward and when to wait. You thank them sincerely, knowing full well that this advice is also a warning. Step too early, and you threaten someone. Step too late, and you become irrelevant. Dessert arrives, sweet and unnecessary. The tone lightens slightly, but the calculations do not stop. Plans are hinted at. Futures are outlined vaguely enough to allow denial later. You are praised again, just enough to remind you that you are still considered valuable. When the meal finally ends, everyone rises slowly, conversations breaking into smaller clusters. The warmth cools instantly. Smiles fade into politeness. Promises are left deliberately incomplete. You leave the table full, not of food, but of information. Later, alone, you replay the evening. Every compliment, every pause, every glance that lasted a heartbeat too long. Family dinners, you now understand, are not about nourishment, they are about positioning, and you are always on the menu. You learn this rule without anyone ever saying it out loud, because in Rome, the most important rules are never written down. They are absorbed through glances, pauses, and the way adults stop talking when you and your siblings enter a room together. At first, you believe what children are told everywhere. That family is safety. That blood matters. That shared childhood creates loyalty. Rome lets you believe this just long enough to make the lessons sting. You grow up alongside siblings who smile like mirrors and watch like strangers. Playtime feels friendly on the surface, but even games carry an edge. Winning matters more than it should. Losing is remembered longer than it deserves. Praise is never evenly distributed, and when one of you is complimented, the others notice immediately. You notice too. Adults compare you constantly, though they pretend not to. One of you is described as clever, another as disciplined, another as charismatic. These labels sound flattering until you realize they are boundaries. Clever children are expected to think. Disciplined ones are expected to obey. Charismatic ones are expected to be visible. No one is allowed to be everything. You start to sense the competition embedded in casual moments. Who is seated closer to power? Who is asked questions? Who is interrupted? And who is listened to? These details matter. They are remembered. They are discussed later, behind doors that close quietly. Affection between siblings exists, but it is cautious. You laugh together. You share stories. You even confide in one another, briefly, before learning that words travel faster than intentions. A comment you make privately reappears days later in a different voice, slightly altered, stripped of context. No one admits how it moved. No one needs to. You learn to guard yourself without becoming openly hostile. Open hostility would alarm the adults who prefer rivalry to remain polite and productive. Rivalry sharpens you. It motivates you. It ensures no one grows complacent. This is how they frame it. This is how Rome frames everything that hurts. As you grow older, the rivalry becomes clearer. Futures are discussed in terms that include you, but never equally. Someone is positioned closer to succession. Someone else is redirected toward religion, marriage, or military service. These decisions are presented as opportunities. You understand them as removals. You watch a sibling react to this shift with forced enthusiasm. They say the right things. They smile at the right moments. Later, you notice they are quieter, more careful. Their presence feels thinner, as if they are slowly being erased while still standing in front of you. Other siblings lean into the competition. They become sharper, louder, more impressive. They cultivate allies, charm tutors, and practice public performances with unnerving precision. You admire them and distrust them at the same time. Rome encourages both reactions. Moments of genuine closeness feel dangerous because they blur the lines. You hesitate before sharing doubts. You stop admitting fears. You learn that vulnerability creates leverage, and leverage is never neutral. Even unintentional advantage can become a weapon. Sometimes a sibling disappears entirely, sent away, married off, assigned elsewhere. Their name fades from conversation so quickly it feels intentional. You are told this is necessary. You are told it is for the good of the household. You are told many things. What you are not told is how easily family becomes optional. The most unsettling realization comes quietly. You understand that you are being shaped to see your siblings as obstacles rather than companions. You resist this at first, clinging to shared memories and private jokes. But Rome is patient. It does not rush this transformation. It allows you to arrive there on your own. You begin to measure your words around them. You observe their successes carefully, not out of jealousy alone, but out of awareness. Their rise affects your position. Your rise affects theirs. This is not cruelty. It is arithmetic. At night, you think about what loyalty means here. You wonder whether it is possible to protect each other without sacrificing yourself. You find no satisfying answer. Rome rarely offers those. In public, you present unity. You stand together, composed, dignified, convincing. The city sees a family. Inside, you see individuals navigating parallel paths that occasionally intersect and often collide. You still care. You still feel affection. But it is layered now, complicated by calculation and caution. You learn to love with distance and compete without open aggression. This balance keeps you functional, because in the imperial household, siblings are rivals first, family second, and sometimes, when the stakes rise high enough, not family at all. Rumors arrive before you learn how to recognize them. At first they sound like weather, something always present and never explained. You hear your name spoken softly behind columns, followed by pauses that stretch just long enough to feel intentional. When you enter a room and conversation shifts, you assume it is coincidence. Rome allows this assumption briefly, then takes it away. You realize that people have opinions about you that you did not help create. They believe you are ambitious, or timid, or clever in a way that suggests danger. None of these ideas come from anything you have done. They come from where you sit at dinners, who stands beside you at ceremonies, and which sibling receives more attention on any given day. Rome is excellent at drawing conclusions without evidence. It considers this efficiency. Rumors spread with remarkable discipline. No one ever admits to starting them. They simply exist, drifting from mouth to mouth until they feel established. By the time you hear one clearly, it has already matured. You are told that you are favored, then that you are resented, then that you are too quiet to matter. All of these circulate simultaneously, which is how you know they are effective. You learn that denial is useless. Addressing a rumor gives it shape. Ignoring it gives it freedom. The safest response is often to behave exactly as expected, even when the expectation is wrong. If people believe you are reserved, you become measured. If they believe you are calculating, you become polite. Rome rewards consistency, even false consistency. Your reputation begins to move ahead of you, entering rooms before you do. People react to the idea of you rather than the person standing in front of them. Some smile too eagerly. Others watch carefully, as if waiting for confirmation of what they already believe. You understand quickly that first impressions in Rome do not belong to you. They belong to whoever speaks first. You notice how rumors are used as tools. Someone praises you publicly, then privately expresses concern about your intentions. Someone warns you about another person using a story that may or may not be true. Information is offered generously and never without purpose. You learn to ask not whether a rumor is accurate, but why it is being shared with you. The most unsettling part is how easily rumors replace reality. A careless expression becomes evidence. A quiet day becomes suspicious. A moment of confidence becomes arrogance by retelling. You begin to edit yourself constantly, not to avoid mistakes, but to avoid interpretations. Even then, Rome finds a way. There is humor in it, eventually. You hear a rumor about yourself that is so wildly inaccurate, you almost admire the creativity. Someone claims you said something you have never thought. Someone else insists you intend something you could not possibly accomplish yet. You smile privately. Rome loves a dramatic arc. It prefers its characters exaggerated. Still, the effect is cumulative. You feel shaped by stories told in your absence. You adjust your posture, your tone, your timing. You speak carefully, knowing that words will be repeated without context and possibly without mercy. Silence becomes a strategy. When you say less, people have less to twist, though they still try. You watch others suffer under rumors too. A relative is labeled unreliable and never escapes it. A former favorite becomes dangerous in the public imagination and slowly fades from relevance. Rome does not correct itself. It simply moves on. The city teaches you that reputation is not earned slowly. It is assembled quickly and revised constantly. You are not judged by your actions so much as by how easily your actions fit an existing narrative. This makes genuine behavior risky. Authenticity is unpredictable. Predictability is safer. Late at night, you wonder who you are beneath the stories. You replay moments, checking whether you recognize yourself in them. Sometimes you do. Sometimes you do not. You learn to hold your identity lightly, knowing it will be interpreted no matter how firmly you claim it. One day, you overhear two people discussing you as if you are not nearby. They speak confidently, outlining your character, your future, your intentions. They get some details right. Others are completely wrong. Neither matters. They stop speaking when they notice you. Smiling politely, unbothered, you return the smile. Because you understand now that rumors are not interruptions to your life in Rome. They are the background noise, constant, shaping, unavoidable. They precede you, follow you, and sometimes decide outcomes before you ever act. In this city, reputation is not something you build. It is something you survive. Your education shifts without ceremony. One day you are debating philosophers and practicing speeches that say nothing too clearly, and the next you are sitting quietly in rooms where nothing is explained and everything matters. This is politics, though no one announces it that way. It arrives disguised as observation. You are told to listen more than you speak, which sounds simple until you realize how carefully everyone else is doing the same. Conversations circle topics without landing on them. Decisions are suggested, not stated. Agreement is expressed through silence, and dissent is expressed through a different kind of silence. You learn quickly that not all quiet is equal. At first, you believe that staying silent is safe. Silence feels neutral, uncommitted, clean. You sit still, attentive, respectful. You think you are doing well. Then someone asks your opinion and waits just a moment too long for your answer. The pause stretches. Eyes turn. Silence thickens. You understand then that silence can also look like hesitation, and hesitation looks like weakness. You begin to study timing. Speaking too soon looks eager. Speaking too late looks calculated. Saying nothing at all suggests you are either hiding something or failing to grasp the moment. Politics in Rome is not about what you say, but when you say it and who hears it. Your tutors change again. These ones speak less and watch more. They ask questions that are not meant to be answered directly. What do you think the Senate wants? How do you believe the people will react? Who benefits if nothing changes? You learn to respond with observations instead of conclusions. You offer possibilities, not commitments. This pleases them. You are invited to sit in on meetings where your presence is symbolic. You are there to be seen, learning. You are there to remind others that you exist. You are there to absorb how power behaves when it believes it is unobserved. You notice that the loudest voices often carry the least authority. You notice that the quietest person in the room is often the one everyone is watching. Politics teaches you patience in a new way. Not the patience of waiting your turn, but the patience of letting others reveal themselves. People talk when they feel comfortable. They talk even more when they feel superior. Silence, when used correctly, invites confession. You experiment carefully. You speak once, briefly, at the right moment. The room shifts. Someone nods. Someone frowns. Someone remembers. The next time, you wait longer. The effect is different. You begin to see how small changes ripple outward. Words are never just words here. They are signals. There is humor in this education, though it is quiet and slightly grim. You watch grown men argue passionately over phrases while pretending the argument is about principle rather than pride. You see alliances form and dissolve over a single misplaced tone. You learn that saying the obvious is rarely appreciated, and saying the unnecessary is often rewarded if it flatters the right person. Silence becomes a tool, but a sharp one. You use it to avoid traps. You use it to force others to fill the space. You use it to suggest agreement without promising anything. But you also learn its limits. Too much silence invites suspicion. People begin to wonder what you are thinking, and in Rome, wondering often turns into worrying. One day, you remain silent when you should not. The moment passes. The discussion moves on. Later, someone mentions it casually. They say they expected you to speak. They say it would have helped. Their tone is neutral, but the message is clear. Absence can be interpreted as opposition. From then on, you learn to speak just enough. A sentence here, a question there. You learn to echo others without endorsing them. You learn to sound engaged without being entangled. This balance is exhausting, but effective. At night, you replay conversations not for content, but for gaps. What was not said, what was avoided, what silence protected, and what it exposed. You begin to understand that politics is not a battle of ideas, but a choreography of restraint. You are not taught how to win arguments. You are taught how to survive them. By the time you grow comfortable in these rooms, you realize comfort is another illusion. You are always being assessed, always being weighed, always being measured by how well you understand that silence is not empty, it is loaded. And learning when to unload it becomes one of the most dangerous lessons of all. Marriage enters your life quietly and far too soon, slipping into conversation before you have decided what kind of person you are supposed to become. At first it sounds theoretical, something adults discuss over wine while you sit nearby pretending not to listen. Names are mentioned casually. Families are referenced. Timelines are suggested in vague, polite terms. You assume it is distant, harmless, not meant for you yet. Rome allows this assumption for exactly as long as it remains useful. Then you notice that people start looking at you differently, not with curiosity or judgment, but with assessment. Your posture, your temperament, your public behavior are no longer just personal traits. They are qualifications. Someone remarks that you are calm under pressure. Someone else notes that you speak well for your age. These observations are not compliments. They are inventory. Romance, you learn quickly, is not forbidden. It is simply irrelevant. Affection might exist, but marriage is about calendars, borders, and obligations that outlive feelings. You are taught this gently, as if the concept itself might bruise you if delivered too sharply. Alliances are discussed in terms of stability. Suitability is measured by lineage, reputation, and how much trouble a union might prevent or provoke. You sit through conversations where your future is outlined without your participation. People debate whether you should marry early or wait. Early signals control. Waiting signals caution. Neither option involves desire. When someone asks your opinion, it is framed carefully, as if your answer is a formality rather than a factor. You begin to understand that marriage in Rome is not about joining lives. It is about merging risks. A good match strengthens the household. A poor one introduces uncertainty. Love is unpredictable. Rome dislikes unpredictability. Potential partners are discussed like proposals, not people. Someone is described as well-connected, someone else as manageable. Temperament is mentioned only if it threatens order. You hear phrases like strong family, reliable bloodline, acceptable reputation. No one mentions laughter. No one asks whether you would enjoy their company. You try to imagine what marriage will feel like. The image is vague. A shared space, a shared schedule, a shared obligation to appear unified. You realize that companionship here is a performance, like everything else. Some people perform it convincingly, others endure it quietly. There is humor in the absurdity, though it is dry and fleeting. You overhear someone arguing passionately about the timing of a marriage that will happen years from now, as if delaying it might destabilize the empire. You almost smile. Rome plans marriages the way it plans wars, with contingencies and exit strategies. Still, the consequences are real. A single union can elevate or diminish entire branches of a family. A misstep can haunt generations. You are reminded of this often, usually by someone who assures you they have your best interests at heart. Their tone is kind. Their meaning is firm. You are allowed preferences. Technically, you may express admiration for certain qualities. Intelligence is acceptable. Composure is encouraged. Passion is treated cautiously, like a fire that must be contained. You learn to speak about relationships in abstract terms, praising virtues rather than individuals. Occasionally, someone mentions happiness. It sounds almost ceremonial, included to make the conversation feel humane. No one lingers on it. Happiness is considered a fortunate side effect, not a requirement. As the discussions continue, you feel time compress. Your childhood feels shorter. Your future feels closer. You are not being rushed exactly, but you are being positioned. Every public appearance, every rumor, every interaction feeds into an invisible ledger that will one day determine who stands beside you. At night, you consider the possibility of wanting something else. The thought feels indulgent and strangely private. You do not dismiss it, but you do not nurture it either. You have learned that nurturing private desires can be dangerous when they conflict with public needs. Marriage, you realize, will not arrive as a surprise. It will arrive as a conclusion, the final line of a discussion that began long before you were ready to hear it. By the time it happens, it will feel inevitable, even if it was never truly chosen. In Rome, love may exist, but marriage is scheduled. You witness the first quiet exile without realizing that is what it is. There is no announcement, no guards storming halls, no dramatic farewell that echoes through marble corridors. One day, a familiar presence is simply absent. A chair at dinner remains empty. A voice that used to interrupt meetings does not. Rome does not explain itself when it removes someone. It just rearranges the furniture and waits to see who notices. At first, you assume coincidence. People are busy. Schedules change. Someone must be ill or traveling. You mention the absence casually, and the response is immediate and smooth. A pause, a gentle nod, a phrase like attending to matters elsewhere. No one elaborates. No one asks questions. The conversation moves on as if nothing has shifted, which is how you know something has. Over the next few days, you begin to notice adjustments. Servants stop mentioning the name. Documents are refiled. A statue that once stood in a prominent alcove is quietly relocated to a less flattering corner. It is still visible, but only if you know where to look. Rome does not destroy immediately. It fades. You listen carefully for whispers, but even gossip seems restrained. This is not scandal, it is correction. The kind of correction that leaves no bruises and therefore invites no sympathy. You learn that outrage is noisy and dangerous. Silence is efficient. Eventually, someone explains it to you, though they never frame it as exile. They speak of necessity, of balance, of removing complications before they become problems. The tone is reasonable, almost comforting. They reassure you that the person is safe, that nothing truly bad has happened. They emphasize this point, which tells you everything you need to know. You imagine the person elsewhere, waking up in unfamiliar rooms, suddenly irrelevant. Their name no longer opens doors. Their opinions no longer matter. They are alive, yes, but quietly reduced. Rome prefers this outcome. Martyrs inspire loyalty. Absences invite forgetting. You replay your last interaction with them. The conversation seemed normal, polite, perhaps even warm. There were no warnings, no raised voices. That is what unsettles you most. In Rome, danger rarely announces itself. It simply arrives, completes its task, and leaves behind a version of normal that feels slightly off. At gatherings, you watch how others adjust. Some people appear relieved, others overcompensate, praising the absent one in vague terms that cost nothing. A few glance around before speaking, checking who might be listening. Everyone learns from this, whether they admit it or not. You learn too. You learn that loyalty is measured by discretion after someone disappears. You learn that asking questions creates unnecessary attention. You learn that memory itself can be risky. Rome rewards those who adapt quickly. There is dark humor in how efficiently it happens. The person is not condemned or cursed. They are simply inconvenient. And Rome handles inconvenience the way it handles clutter, by moving it out of sight and pretending the space was always meant to be empty. At night, you consider how easily this could happen to you. No drama, no explanation, just a shift in tone and a new routine somewhere else. You imagine your own name spoken less often than not at all. It is not frightening in a loud way. It is frightening in a practical one. The palace continues to function perfectly. Meals are served, meetings are held, decisions are made. Rome does not slow down for anyone. This continuity is the point. Power proves itself by how little disruption it causes when it removes something human. Later, you overhear someone refer to the exile as unfortunate. The word is chosen carefully. It suggests sympathy without responsibility. You understand the language now. You understand how Rome absolves itself. One afternoon, you pass the relocated statue. It is dusty already. Fewer people walk this corridor. You stop for a moment longer than necessary, then move on. Lingering would look sentimental. Sentiment invites questions. This is the lesson the quiet exile teaches you. Rome does not need force to erase people. It needs patience and consensus. It needs everyone to agree, silently, that forgetting is easier than remembering. And it needs you to keep walking as if nothing has changed, because that is how erasure becomes complete. Religion enters your education the same way politics did, quietly and without asking whether you are ready. At first it feels comforting. Incense curls through the air. Priests speak in steady voices. Rituals promise order in a world that rarely offers it. You are told that the gods watch, that they care, that they reward virtue and punish excess. This sounds reassuring until you notice how often the gods seem to agree with whoever is currently in charge. Ceremonies are everywhere, before meetings, before campaigns, before decisions that have already been made. You stand beside elders as offerings are prepared and omens interpreted. The language is reverent, but the timing is suspicious. The gods always seem to approve the next step. If they do not, the ritual is repeated until they do. You are taught the proper gestures early, when to bow, when to look solemn, when to appear moved. Sincerity is encouraged, but accuracy is more important. A well-timed prayer can smooth over dissent. A public sacrifice can quiet a restless crowd. Faith, you learn, is most effective when everyone sees it at the same time. Priests become familiar figures, drifting between temple and palace with ease. Some are genuinely devout, others are excellent listeners. You learn to tell the difference slowly, mostly by observing who gets invited where. The most influential priests are rarely the most spiritual. They are the ones who understand optics. You watch rituals unfold like theater. The costumes are elaborate, the choreography precise, the meaning flexible. When a decision is popular, the gods are praised for their wisdom. When it is unpopular, the gods are said to be testing the people. Either way, responsibility flows upward and outward, never settling on those who act. You begin to notice how language shifts depending on the audience. In private, religion is discussed pragmatically. In public, it is sacred. A policy becomes divine will. A compromise becomes piety. Opposition becomes impiety, which is a much more useful accusation. There is a strange humor in how adaptable holiness becomes. A god once associated with harvest is suddenly invoked for military success. A festival meant for gratitude turns into a display of loyalty. The crowd cheers, comforted by the sense that the universe agrees with Rome's plans. You are instructed to participate enthusiastically. Your presence at rituals signals continuity. It reassures the people that the divine order remains intact. You hold sacred objects, recite memorized phrases, and maintain an expression that suggests reverence without curiosity. Questions are not forbidden, but they are rarely encouraged in public. In quieter moments, a tutor explains the value of tradition. Tradition stabilizes. It gives people something older than their anger to focus on. You nod, understanding that the gods are being asked to do administrative work. It is not disrespectful. It is efficient. You witness a failed ritual once, an omen interpreted poorly. The reaction is swift and subtle. The priest is reassigned, the interpretation revised, the public version smoothed over. The gods, it turns out, are forgiving when their messaging needs clarification. Over time, the line between belief and performance blurs completely. You find yourself moved by the rhythm of chants, even as you recognize their purpose. You feel the weight of history in temples that have stood longer than any living memory. You also see how easily that weight can be redirected. The people believe sincerely. That part is real. They pray for safety, for food, for meaning. Rome understands this and uses it carefully. A ruler who appears favored by the gods gains patience. A ruler who appears cursed invites unrest. Divinity becomes another form of approval rating. You are warned never to mock the gods, even privately. Not because the gods will punish you, but because people might hear. Faith is personal, but its consequences are public. Respect is non-negotiable, even when belief is flexible. Eventually, you realize that religion here is not false, it is selective. It highlights what is useful and softens what is inconvenient. It offers comfort when Rome needs compliance and awe when Rome needs silence. You participate because participation is expected. You bow because bowing costs little and earns much. You learn the prayers because knowing them matters more than believing them. And somewhere between incense and applause, you understand the lesson being taught. In Rome, the gods are powerful, but only because Rome knows how to speak for them. You stop trusting books to tell you the truth before they ever admit they are lying. Scrolls are neat, orderly, confident. Rooms are not. Rooms breathe, shift, and react the moment someone important enters. This is where your real education sharpens, not in libraries, but in doorways, corners, and moments when everyone pretends nothing is happening. You learn quickly that power rarely announces itself. The loudest voice is usually compensating. The most decorated figure often needs reminding. Real authority sits quietly, watching who speaks first and who looks relieved when someone else does. You stop listening only to words and start watching posture, pacing, eye contact. You notice who interrupts and who never needs to. At gatherings, you scan instinctively. Who stands close to whom? Who is allowed to sit? Who is asked questions? And who is politely ignored? You notice that some people speak often and change nothing, while others say very little and change everything. When someone clears their throat and the room pauses, you make a mental note. You learn to arrive early and leave late. Early lets you see who seeks whom out before an audience forms. Late lets you see who lingers after the performance ends. The conversations at the edges matter more than the speeches at the center. Power likes privacy. Pretenders like stages. There is humor in how transparent it becomes once you know what to look for. You watch someone flatter a figure they believe is influential, only to be ignored entirely by the person who actually decides outcomes. You watch ambitious men circle the wrong pillar, convinced proximity equals relevance. You almost admire the confidence. Books taught you theory. Rooms teach you consequence. A law exists on parchment. Its enforcement exists in glances exchanged across a table. A decree sounds firm until you notice who smiles and who tightens their jaw. You begin to understand that nothing is final until the room accepts it. You start testing this awareness carefully. You watch reactions when certain names are mentioned. Some names create warmth, others create silence. Some cause people to adjust their stance, as if bracing. You catalog these responses quietly. Information is safest when it stays unannounced. You also learn who is pretending. They are easy to spot once you stop being impressed by titles. They talk in absolutes. They reference authority constantly. They remind everyone who they are. Truly powerful people do not need reminders. Their presence settles arguments before they begin. At first, this knowledge feels like a trick, something clever you have discovered. Then it becomes a responsibility. Once you see the structure beneath the ceremony, you cannot pretend it is not there. You cannot unknow who matters and who is ornamental. You cannot unsee the gaps between rank and influence. Sometimes you misread a room. It happens. The correction is swift and quiet. A conversation ends too abruptly. An invitation does not arrive. No one explains. You adjust. Reading rooms is not about perfection. It is about recovery. You learn to place yourself deliberately. Standing too close suggests ambition. Standing too far suggests irrelevance. The right distance shifts depending on who else is present. You adapt constantly, like a guest in someone else's house who knows the furniture might move. You also learn restraint. Knowing who holds power does not mean acknowledging it openly. Deference must be subtle. Obvious flattery is dismissed. Indifference is risky. The safest approach is attentive neutrality, the art of appearing engaged without appearing dependent. There are moments when this awareness isolates you. You notice tensions others miss. You sense decisions forming before they are spoken. You smile at jokes that are not funny because you understand their purpose. You nod at statements you know will dissolve by morning. It is exhausting in a quiet way, yet it keeps you safe. Books cannot warn you when a mood shifts. Rooms can. A sudden stillness, a glance exchanged, a pause that lasts half a breath too long. You feel these changes before you think them. Your body learns before your mind confirms. Eventually, you realize this skill is irreversible. You walk into spaces and immediately map them. Who leads? Who follows? Who pretends to lead? Who is waiting? You no longer ask who has power. You watch who everyone else watches. And once you know that, the books start to feel less important. Court gossip reaches you long before anyone admits it exists. Officially, there are no rumors, only misunderstandings and unfortunate interpretations. Unofficially, gossip is the circulatory system of the palace, moving faster than messengers and carrying far more useful information. You learn to listen without appearing interested, which is harder than it sounds when someone is whispering about who might disappear next. At first, gossip sounds trivial. Who dined with whom? Who arrived late? Who laughed a little too loudly at the wrong joke? You dismiss it as boredom, dressed up as intrigue. Then you notice patterns. The same names appear repeatedly, always just before something shifts. A promotion, a quiet demotion, a sudden illness that clears political pathways remarkably well. You stop dismissing it. You learn that gossip is rarely about truth. It is about direction. It points, nudges, hints. It tells you where not to stand, who not to praise too publicly, which alliances are cooling even if everyone involved insists they are stronger than ever. Court gossip does not need to be accurate. It only needs to be believed long enough to shape behavior. You develop a method. You listen to the same story from different mouths and note what changes. What remains consistent matters. What grows more dramatic is usually decoration. What is said quietly, almost reluctantly, carries weight. The person who does not want to repeat something is often the one who knows it is dangerous. There is humor in how seriously everyone pretends not to care. People lean in and lower their voices while insisting they do not engage in gossip. They always engage in gossip. It is framed as concern, as loyalty, as a warning offered for your own good. You thank them sincerely. Gratitude keeps information flowing. You also learn restraint. Gossip is not meant to be passed along freely. It is meant to be stored, used sparingly. Mentioning the wrong thing to the wrong person can collapse trust faster than any accusation. Silence, you discover, is not ignorance. It is discipline. Certain phrases become alerts. People say someone is ambitious when they mean reckless. They say someone is devoted when they mean useful. They say someone is tired when they mean vulnerable. You translate instinctively now. Fluent in implication, you notice how gossip creates invisible borders. Entire hallways become unsafe depending on who is rumored to be displeased. Certain gatherings become traps disguised as invitations. You avoid them gracefully, always with an excuse that sounds reasonable. Rome rewards those who leave before the ground shifts. Sometimes gossip saves lives, or at least careers. A whispered warning keeps you from aligning with someone whose favor is about to expire. A casual remark steers you away from a conversation that would have placed you on the wrong side of a forming consensus. You begin to appreciate how survival here depends less on strength and more on timing. There is a darker side too. Gossip can manufacture reality. Enough repetition turns suspicion into expectation. Expectation turns into behavior. Behavior turns into evidence. You watch someone falter under the weight of a story that may never have been true, but was useful to believe. Rome does not need proof when momentum exists. You are careful never to start rumors. Initiators are visible. Repeaters are protected. You repeat only what benefits your awareness, never what benefits your ego. Being known as a source is dangerous. Being known as a listener is safe. At times, you catch yourself enjoying the absurdity, the seriousness with which trivial details are dissected, the confidence with which incomplete information is delivered, the elaborate theories built on a raised eyebrow or a delayed reply. It would be funny if it were not lethal. You also learn when gossip goes silent. Silence is its own message. When no one will speak about someone, it means the matter is settled. When names stop circulating, it means Rome has moved on. That is the most final judgment of all. Gradually, gossip becomes less distracting and more directional. You stop reacting emotionally to what you hear. You treat it like weather, a storm forming, a chill moving in. You adjust accordingly, cloaks ready, routes planned. You realize that court gossip is not about scandal, it is about navigation. And once you learn how to read it, you stop walking blindly through rooms that are already deciding what happens next. You attend your first execution the way Rome intends you to, as an obligation rather than an event. It is scheduled, announced, and prepared with the same efficiency as a banquet or a dedication ceremony. There is no suspense about whether it will happen, only about how long people will remember it afterward. You are dressed carefully. Appearances matter. You are positioned where you can be seen without being too close. Close implies fascination. Far implies discomfort. Rome prefers approval wrapped in composure. The crowd gathers early, murmuring as if this were a performance with assigned seating. Vendors move through with food. Children sit on shoulders. Someone laughs at a joke that has nothing to do with what is about to occur. The condemned is brought out without ceremony. No dramatic speech. No final plea that echoes through history. Just a person who once occupied space in rooms you recognize and now occupies none. Their name is spoken quickly, almost politely, as if lingering might make it awkward. You realize how much effort Rome puts into making endings feel administrative. You watch the officials more than the condemned. They are calm, focused. One adjusts a sleeve, Another checks positioning. These people have done this before and will do it again. There is no cruelty in their faces, only routine. Rome does not hate its enemies. It processes them. The crowd quiets not out of reverence, but expectation. Silence is a signal that everyone knows their role. You notice how little emotion is required. No one asks whether this is necessary. That decision was made elsewhere, earlier, by people who are not here now. This is just the visible conclusion. When it happens, it is faster than you expect. There is no dramatic crescendo, just an action followed by a shift in atmosphere. The body falls. The sound is dull. The crowd exhales collectively. As if relieved, the waiting part is over. Someone nearby comments on the efficiency. Someone else complains they missed it. You feel something tighten in your chest, but you keep your expression neutral. You have practiced this. Reaction is noted. Indifference is remembered. You understand now why people say Rome is practical. It has no patience for extended mourning, especially for those it has already decided to forget. What unsettles you most is not the act itself. It is how quickly the space resets. Officials move. The body is removed. The platform is cleared. Within minutes, people are discussing dinner plans. The ground does not look different. The air does not feel heavy. Rome has an incredible ability to absorb endings without staining its surroundings. You are spoken to afterward, casually. Someone asks what you thought. The question is a test disguised as conversation. You answer carefully. Necessary, order, stability. Words chosen because they are safe, not because they are false. The response earns nods of approval. You passed. Later, you hear jokes about the condemned. Their mistakes are exaggerated, their flaws suddenly obvious. This is how Rome justifies itself after the fact. Humor smooths the edges. It transforms finality into anecdote. You realize that mockery is a form of burial here. That night, you struggle to sleep, not because of horror, but because of clarity. You understand something fundamental now. Rome does not treat death as sacred or tragic. It treats it as punctuation, a period at the end of a sentence that has already been rewritten several times. You think about how visible the execution was and how invisible the decision must have been. Somewhere, weeks ago, people discussed this calmly over food. They weighed inconvenience against risk. They chose an ending. What you witnessed was simply the announcement. There is a dark efficiency to it all. No lingering resentment, no chaos, just closure. You begin to understand why executions are public, not to terrify, but to normalize, to remind everyone that endings happen quickly and are rarely discussed afterward. You are different after this, though no one remarks on it. You notice how often people reference consequences in abstract terms. You notice how easily words like necessary and unfortunate are deployed. You notice how rarely anyone speaks of mercy unless it is strategic. You realize that in Rome, survival is not about avoiding danger entirely. It is about never becoming an ending that needs to be scheduled. Wealth is the first thing people notice about your life, and the last thing that ever answers to you. Gold glints from every surface. Marble floors are cool beneath your feet, even in summer. Silk hangs where wool would suffice. Servants anticipate needs you have not voiced yet. From the outside, it looks like abundance. From the inside, it feels like inventory. Nothing here is yours in the way people mean it. The rooms belong to Rome. The jewelry belongs to lineage. The food belongs to ceremony. Even your clothing is chosen to reflect continuity rather than comfort. You wear fortune the way others wear armor, heavy, polished, and never removed in public. You learn quickly that wealth is not freedom. It is obligation with better lighting. Every object has a purpose beyond enjoyment. Every gift carries a memory of who gave it and why. You cannot discard anything without consulting someone who did not choose it either. Possession here is communal, supervised, and temporary. people speak often about what you will inherit. They gesture broadly at estates, titles, and legacies as if listing items on a shelf. They never ask what you want. Desire is irrelevant. Stability is the goal. You smile, nod, and accept congratulations for futures that have already been scheduled. You notice how carefully access is controlled. You can touch almost nothing without permission. A servant unlocks doors. A steward catalogs valuables. Even your personal quarters are maintained by others who know where everything is and remind you gently if something is misplaced. Privacy is treated as a courtesy, not a right. There is humor in the contradiction. You dine on rare foods while being told when to eat. You sit on ornate furniture while being told where to sit. You are surrounded by luxury and monitored like a resource. Rome does not trust what it invests in. You try once to claim something small, a book, a trinket, something insignificant. The reaction is polite but firm. Of course, they say, but it must be recorded. Everything must be recorded. Ownership requires witnesses. You abandon the attempt. Wanting less attention is its own form of wealth here. Your future is discussed constantly, always without you present. Marriages, appointments, alliances. The language is generous. Opportunity, honor, duty. You are praised for flexibility you have not yet demonstrated. They speak as if you are adaptable by nature rather than constrained by design. At night, you imagine a life where wealth means choice, where money creates distance from expectation instead of tightening it. The thought feels indulgent. You dismiss it. Daydreams do not survive well in rooms this large. You notice how others envy you. Their glances linger on fabric and ornament. They mistake visibility for power. You almost want to explain, but explanations invite questions, and questions invite concern. Concern invites intervention. You let the illusion stand. It protects you as much as it deceives them. There are moments when the weight becomes obvious. A decision is made about you that alters years of your life. It is announced cheerfully, as if revealing a pleasant surprise. You respond with gratitude. Gratitude is expected. Resistance would sound ungrateful, and ungrateful people are unpredictable. You understand now why wealth is displayed so openly. It distracts from the lack of agency. Gold catches the eye. Silk softens the edges. Spectacle keeps people from asking who decides. Rome has perfected this balance. Give enough to dazzle, not enough to escape. Even your time is not your own. Your schedule fills itself. Meetings appear. Obligations multiply. Leisure is structured and supervised. Free time is suspicious unless it serves a purpose. You learn to rest efficiently, never too long, never too visibly. Occasionally, you glimpse people who truly own things, merchants, artisans. They hold objects they chose, earned, and can lose without ceremony. Their possessions are smaller, but they belong entirely to them. The thought unsettles you more than it should. You come to understand that wealth here is not about having, it is about being had. And the greatest luxury in Rome is not gold or land or legacy. It is the ability to choose a future that has not already been claimed. Advisors change so often that you stop learning their names right away. Faces blur together in the early months, each one arriving with a polished smile, a carefully practiced humility, and the same assurance delivered in slightly different accents. They all claim loyalty. They all emphasize service. They all insist they are here for stability. You learn to nod politely, while mentally counting how long it will be before they vanish. Some last weeks, some last years, none last forever. They arrive with scrolls, suggestions, and stories about their predecessors. Those stories are never generous. The last advisor was short-sighted. The one before that was corrupt. The one before that misunderstood Rome. Each new arrival positions themselves as the correction. You begin to recognize the pattern. Every advisor defines loyalty as agreement and wisdom as alignment with their own survival. You listen carefully, not to what they recommend, but to how they frame it. True believers speak about Rome. Opportunists speak about outcomes. The most dangerous ones speak about you. They flatter your insight, your instincts, your potential, while quietly measuring how useful you are to their next step. You notice how often advisors speak in hypotheticals. If this happened, if that alliance shifted, if circumstances required flexibility. Hypotheticals are safe. They allow planning without commitment. They allow betrayal without accusation. An advisor who speaks too confidently about the future is either foolish or already planning an exit. Meetings become exercises in observation. You watch who looks relieved when decisions are delayed. You watch who presses urgency when patience would benefit someone else. You notice who lingers after discussions end, hoping to steer interpretation once the room thins. Power does not always announce itself, but ambition nearly always does. There is humor in how earnestly they promise discretion. Everyone promises discretion. Everyone also assumes you know they are sharing selective truths. Information here is currency. Advisors spend it carefully, always holding something back for leverage. The ones who claim transparency are usually the ones hiding the most. You learn to give them just enough. Enough trust to function. Enough distance to survive. You never fully commit to any single voice, no matter how convincing. Rome punishes those who choose favorites. It rewards those who remain adaptable. Sometimes, an advisor disappears between meetings, not dramatically, not violently. They are simply reassigned, replaced. Their name is no longer spoken. Their ideas quietly dissolve. You learn not to ask questions. Advisors who fail do not leave lessons behind. They leave caution. Others depart with grace. They announce new appointments elsewhere, congratulate you warmly, and leave behind gifts that feel like apologies. You thank them sincerely. Burning bridges is inefficient. Even failed advisors can become useful again in different contexts. What unsettles you most is how rarely loyalty aligns with longevity. The advisors who genuinely care often leave first. They tire of compromises. They speak too honestly. They fail to adjust when the political weather shifts. The survivors are the flexible ones, the ones who always have another option ready. You realize that advisors are not meant to be anchors. They are meant to be tools. Rome rotates them deliberately. Fresh perspectives prevent stagnation. Constant turnover prevents consolidation. No one is allowed to grow too comfortable near power. This includes you. You begin to anticipate advice before it is offered. You know which suggestion will arrive next based on who benefits from it. You hear enthusiasm and translate it into self-interest. You hear caution and wonder whose position is threatened. Over time, the voices blur into a single chorus of competing incentives. Occasionally, an advisor surprises you. They offer counsel that genuinely disadvantages them. These moments stand out. You remember these people. They rarely last long. Rome has little patience for sincerity that cannot be weaponized. As advisors rotate, you adapt. You learn to extract value quickly. You learn to end conversations before expectations form. You learn to appear receptive without appearing dependent. It is a delicate balance. Too distant and you seem uncooperative. Too close and you become predictable. At night, you think about how exhausting it must be to live this way voluntarily, to constantly calculate exits, to always plan alternatives. Then you realize that this is not voluntary for them either. Advisors survive by motion. Stillness is dangerous. You stop resenting the turnover. It becomes background noise. Faces come and go. Advice shifts. The structure remains. Rome does not rely on individuals. It relies on systems that expect replacement. And slowly, uncomfortably, you understand the final lesson. Advisors do not serve power. They orbit it. and everyone in orbit is always one miscalculation away from falling away into silence. Paranoia does not arrive all at once. It seeps in quietly, introduced as prudence, praised as wisdom, rewarded as survival. At first, it feels like awareness. You double-check doors. You listen a little longer before responding. You pause before trusting praise. No one criticizes this. In fact, they compliment you on your maturity. Soon, caution stops feeling optional. You replay conversations in your head, not for meaning, but for tone. You wonder why someone emphasized a word, why another avoided eye contact, why a smile lingered half a second too long. You begin to catalog moments that once would have passed unnoticed. Now they feel significant, even if you cannot explain why. You notice how often you are being watched, or at least how often it feels that way. Servants avert their eyes too quickly. Courtiers look away too slowly. You remind yourself that observation is normal here. Then you remind yourself that normal does not mean harmless. Rome thrives on attention. It sharpens people. You stop speaking freely, even in familiar rooms. Walls have ears, but more importantly, people have memories. You learn to phrase thoughts as questions. Questions sound harmless. Statements sound final. Finality invites correction. At night, you listen for sounds that were always there. Footsteps in corridors, doors opening, whispers carried by stone. The palace never sleeps. It shifts. It breathes. You tell yourself this is infrastructure, not conspiracy. Still, you listen. There is humor in how elaborate your internal precautions become. You consider which routes to take through hallways depending on who you might encounter. You rehearse neutral responses to hypothetical accusations that have not yet formed. You plan exits from conversations that have not started. You almost laugh at yourself, except laughter draws attention. You trust fewer people now, but you do not trust yourself entirely either. Your instincts sharpen, then second-guess themselves. You wonder whether your caution is justified or merely contagious. Paranoia spreads socially here. You can catch it by proximity. You start noticing patterns that may or may not exist. A meeting rescheduled twice. An advisor suddenly distant. A name not mentioned. You tell yourself Rome is complex, that coincidence still exists. Then you remember how often coincidence has already proven useful to someone else. Sleep becomes lighter. You wake easily. Your mind runs scenarios without being asked. If this happens, then that follows. If that follows, then you adjust. Planning becomes reflex. Peace feels irresponsible. People praise you for being careful. They say you are learning fast. They say you understand how things work. You thank them, even as you recognize that this praise reinforces the behavior. Rome does not discourage paranoia. It cultivates it. A cautious elite is a controllable one. You find yourself studying faces for sincerity. You weigh every compliment. You test loyalty by offering harmless information and watching where it resurfaces. You do not like that you do this, but you like being blindsided even less. Occasionally, someone acts with genuine warmth. It startles you. You hesitate before responding, searching for angles that are not there. Sometimes there truly are none. Sometimes kindness is just kindness. The problem is that you no longer know how to receive it without suspicion. You begin to miss ignorance. Not innocence, but ignorance. The luxury of not knowing how many ways a moment can turn against you. That luxury is gone now, replaced by vigilance that feels necessary and exhausting in equal measure. There is a point when you realize paranoia has stopped feeling like a reaction and started feeling like a companion. It sits beside you in meetings. It whispers during silence. It reminds you that safety here is temporary and conditional. Yet, it also keeps you alive. It notices shifts before they become threats. It urges restraint when emotion tempts honesty. It is unpleasant, but effective. Rome respects effectiveness. You accept that this is part of the role. Just as wealth is managed and loyalty negotiated, fear is curated. You learn to live with it without letting it show. Calm is still required. Composure is still expected. But inside, the awareness never fully rests. And you understand now that in Rome, paranoia is not a flaw in the system. It is the system learning to look back at you. Festivals arrive like a sudden fever, loud, colorful, and impossible to ignore. The city erupts in motion as if Rome itself is stretching after a long sleep. Streets fill with music, vendors shout over one another, garlands appear overnight, and the smell of wine and roasting meat seeps into every corner. From the palace balconies, it looks joyous. From inside the palace, it feels strategic. You are encouraged to attend, to be seen, to smile at the right moments. Festivals are reassurance made physical. They tell the people that everything is fine, that the gods are pleased, that Rome is generous and eternal. They also tell you something else, that when celebration grows louder, something underneath is being quieted. Inside the palace, the mood tightens. Meetings become shorter and more frequent. Conversations lower in volume. Advisors rotate through corridors with purposeful expressions, whispering updates that never quite sound like good news. The city dances. The palace calculates. You walk through halls hung with decorations meant to echo the streets below. Flowers, banners, symbols of abundance. The contrast is almost funny. Outside, laughter spills freely. Inside, every word is measured. You begin to recognize the rhythm. Festivals do not happen when Rome is relaxed. They happen when Rome needs space to move pieces without being watched too closely. From your position, you can hear the distant roar of the crowd. It rises and falls like the tide. Applause, music, drums. You imagine the streets packed shoulder to shoulder, people forgetting grievances in exchange for spectacle. It works. It always does. Hunger is easier to manage when people are entertained. You attend one celebration briefly, escorted and protected. The crowd cheers when they see you. They always do. You wave, perform warmth, project continuity. For a moment, you almost feel it. The energy, the affection. Then you notice the guards watching the edges more than the faces. You notice how quickly you are ushered away. Visibility is useful. Prolonged exposure is not. Back inside, discussions resume immediately. The festival is referenced casually, as if it were weather. Good turnout, strong response, a success. The language is detached. No one talks about joy. They talk about coverage. While the city is distracted, decisions accelerate. Appointments are changed. Alliances tested. Quiet messages sent. You begin to understand that festivals are not interruptions to politics. They are part of it. There is dark humor in how predictable it becomes. When tensions rise, music follows. When unrest threatens, games appear. When negotiations grow dangerous, the people are invited to drink. Rome has learned that celebration is cheaper than suppression and far more popular. At night, the noise drifts through open windows. Laughter, singing, occasional shouts. It feels almost intimate, like the city is confiding in itself. You sit with advisors who speak in careful tones about risk and timing. The contrast is surreal. Outside, joy. Inside, anxiety wrapped in formality. You notice how often the word stability appears during festivals. Stability is always praised when it is most fragile. The gods are thanked publicly, privately. Contingency plans multiply. You learn that hope is something Rome provides outwardly, not something it relies on internally. Servants move faster. Guards are doubled. Routes are adjusted. Everything appears festive, but nothing is relaxed. The palace is alert in a way that feels almost predatory, waiting for the right moment to act while eyes are elsewhere. You think about the people below, dancing, drinking, cheering. You wonder how many of them sense the tension. Some probably do. Most probably do not. Rome has always been good at giving the people what they want, just long enough to do what it needs. There is a moment, brief and quiet, when you stand alone and listen to the city celebrate. For an instant, it feels peaceful. Then you remember that peace here is usually a byproduct, not a goal. The music swells again, drowning out the thought. By the time the festivals begin to fade, the palace has already changed shape. New arrangements are in place. Old problems have been redirected. The city wakes the next day with sore heads and fond memories. The palace wakes with revised strategies. You learn to associate celebration with caution. When Rome throws a party, it is rarely for no reason. Joy is generous, but it is also useful. It softens edges. It buys time. It convinces people that nothing serious could possibly be happening behind so much color and sound. And as the last banners are taken down and the streets return to their usual rhythm, you understand the lesson clearly. When the city is loudest, the palace is listening hardest. Responsibility finds you in uneven ways. One morning you are summoned with a tone that suggests disappointment has already been rehearsed. No one explains why at first. Explanations come later, once reactions have been observed. You stand there, composed, while a problem is outlined in careful language that never quite names a culprit: supply shortages. A misjudged appointment, a decision that somehow traces itself back to you without ever touching your hands. You listen, nodding slowly, recognizing the shape of the moment. This is not about causation. It is about absorption. Rome needs somewhere to place its frustration, and you are visible enough to be useful. You accept the criticism calmly. Calm is interpreted as maturity. Defensiveness would look like guilt. Inside, you run through the facts. You were not involved. You were not consulted. You were not even present. None of that matters. Accountability here is about proximity to power, not participation. You are close enough to take the weight and distant enough that nothing truly breaks. Later that same week, the opposite happens. A success is announced publicly. Applause fills a hall you did not know you were supposed to influence. Your name is mentioned alongside words like foresight and leadership. You glance around, searching for the actual architect of the outcome. They smile politely and say nothing. Credit, like blame, has found a convenient home. There is a strange comedy in how quickly you adapt. You thank people for praise you did not earn with the same sincerity you showed when accepting blame you did not deserve. Emotion is irrelevant. Consistency is everything. Rome values those who can carry narratives without flinching. You learn that blame is a tool. It absorbs anger, redirects pressure, and protects structures. Praise is also a tool. It builds myths, reinforces hierarchy, and creates expectations. Both are assigned deliberately, rarely accurately. Accuracy is inefficient. At dinners, people joke about your resilience. They say you handle things well. You smile, understanding that handling things well often means handling things quietly. You notice how quickly opinions shift once an official story is established. People who seemed outraged days ago now shrug. People who were indifferent now applaud. The story has settled. That is what matters. You begin to see how narratives are constructed in real time. A failure is softened by attributing it to growing pains. A success is amplified by attaching it to familiar faces. You are a familiar face now. Familiar faces are useful. There is a moment when someone apologizes privately. They say they know you were not responsible. They say it softly, as if sharing a secret. You thank them and move on. Private apologies do not change public outcomes. They exist to ease consciences, not correct records. You also notice how praise creates obligations. People expect you to live up to the version of you they have celebrated. They reference your supposed achievements as justification for future demands. You are praised into a corner. Blame wounds, praise binds. You learn to treat both the same way, as weather, passing, influential, but not personal. You remind yourself that neither defines you unless you allow it to. Allowing it would make you predictable. There is humor in watching others react more strongly than you do. Some are outraged on your behalf. Some are thrilled by your rise. Both groups assume you feel the same. You do not correct them. Correcting people about their assumptions rarely ends well. Over time, you grow skilled at carrying stories without letting them settle too deeply. You acknowledge praise without expanding on it. You accept blame without internalizing it. You understand that Rome does not reward innocence or punish guilt consistently. It rewards usefulness. You also understand that this will not be the last time. There will be more failures you inherit and more triumphs you are handed. The balance will never be fair. Fairness is not a Roman virtue. One evening, alone, you reflect on how little of your public identity is under your control. Your name moves through conversations shaped by needs you did not create. You are a symbol now, adjusted as required. The realization is unsettling, but clarifying. You are not judged by what you do. You are judged by what Rome needs you to represent at any given moment. Once you understand that, the praise stings less and the blame cuts shallow. They are both just roles you step into, perform competently, and leave behind when the story moves on. It happens faster than you expect, which is how Rome prefers it. One day your relative's name still opens doors. The next day it closes mouths. There is no announcement, no official condemnation, just a shift so subtle you almost miss it until you realize no one is laughing at their jokes anymore. At first, you assume it is temporary. Favor fluctuates. Everyone knows this. You reassure yourself that protection does not evaporate overnight. Then you notice the signs. Invitations stop arriving. Guards who once nodded respectfully now acknowledge them with professional neutrality. Servants hesitate before following instructions they would have obeyed without question a week ago. You watch closely, because watching is safer than asking. The explanations arrive wrapped in polite language. A misunderstanding, a poor choice of allies, an unfortunate impression. No one accuses directly. Accusations create conflict. Rome prefers implication. It allows everyone to distance themselves without appearing disloyal. Your relative tries to act normal. They continue to dress well, speak confidently, and reference plans that no longer exist. It is painful to witness, not because of the fall itself, but because of the delay. Rome has already moved on. They have not been informed yet. You feel the instinct to intervene, to remind people of history, of service, of shared blood. You suppress it. Blood does not protect here. It connects. And connections become liabilities when someone is marked as unstable. You learn quickly how protection actually works. It is not built on affection or loyalty. It is built on relevance. The moment relevance wavers, protection loosens. The moment it loosens, everyone steps back, just enough to avoid being pulled down too. There is a dark humor in how careful people become around you. They offer sympathy in private while adjusting their behavior in public. They say they hope things resolve soon. They do not ask how they can help. Help would imply commitment. You also notice how Rome rewrites memory. Your relatives' past achievements are quietly minimized, their successes reframed as group efforts, their influence described as overstated. It is astonishing how quickly history becomes negotiable once someone loses leverage. At family gatherings, the atmosphere changes. Conversations skirt certain topics. Compliments are redistributed. You feel eyes flick toward you, measuring distance. You realize that protection is contagious only while it exists. Once it fades, proximity becomes risky. You speak to your relative less, not because you care less, but because care has become dangerous. Every interaction is observed, every word potentially quoted. You hate this about yourself. The calculation, the restraint. You also understand it. There is a moment when you see it in their eyes. The realization, the awareness that the safety net was never permanent, that the walls they leaned on were decorative, that the smiles they trusted were conditional. They say nothing, but their posture changes. Confidence tightens into control. You want to tell them how Rome works, how this is not personal, how it happens to everyone eventually. You do not. Explanations do not comfort when reality is shifting underfoot. Soon, their absence becomes noticeable, not complete, but reduced. Fewer appearances, shorter conversations. Their name is still spoken, but always in the past tense. Rome does not erase immediately. It fades. You learn the most important lesson during this time. Protection does not fail gradually. It fails all at once, after everyone has prepared themselves to pretend it never existed. Those who relied on it most are always the last to know. You also learn that survival requires adjustment without spectacle. You do not publicly distance yourself. That would look cruel. You do not publicly defend them. That would look reckless. You maintain a careful neutrality that satisfies no one completely but offends no one enough. At night, you think about how close it came to being you, how easily favor could have tilted the other way, how thin the line is between being protected and being tolerated. Rome teaches this lesson repeatedly, but it never feels routine. Protection here is not a shield. It is a shadow, and the moment the light shifts, you discover how exposed you have always been standing beneath it. Generosity becomes something you study rather than feel. At first, you give instinctively, a favor here, a gift there, a gesture meant to smooth a moment or build goodwill. Rome accepts this politely and then asks for more. You learn quickly that unmeasured generosity creates appetite, not loyalty, so you begin to ration it. You watch how others give. The successful ones never empty their hands. They offer enough to be noticed, never enough to be depended on. They understand that generosity here is not charity. It is positioning. Every gift creates a line. Every favor draws a thread. Too many threads and you are tangled. You start small. Invitations, introductions, a word spoken at the right time. These cost you little and earn you visibility. People thank you warmly and remember it just long enough to feel inclined toward you. That is the goal. Inclination, not obligation. Obligation invites resentment. You also learn timing. Giving too early makes you look eager. Giving too late makes you look manipulative. The sweet spot is anticipation, offering what someone needs just before they ask. It creates the illusion of intuition, which people admire more than generosity itself. There is humor in how quickly people reveal their expectations. Someone praises your kindness, then immediately follows with a request that assumes continuation. You smile and decline gently, offering something adjacent instead. They accept, recalibrate, and continue speaking to you with respect. You file this away. Boundaries earn more than excess. You discover that generosity works best when it is visible but not theatrical. Public gifts attract attention. Private gifts create leverage. You choose carefully which to deploy. A public act reassures the crowd. A private act binds an individual. Neither should be overused. Resources are plentiful around you, but access is not. You cannot give what you do not control, and you control less than people assume. You learn to give influence rather than objects, endorsements rather than promises, presence rather than protection. These are renewable. You also learn when not to give. This is harder. Refusing feels risky. You practice phrasing that sounds supportive without committing. Not now. Let me see. We will revisit. These phrases become shields. People hear hope without receiving substance. Most accept this. Some do not. Those who do not reveal themselves quickly Occasionally, you miscalculate. You give too much to someone who immediately overplays it. They name drop, they boast. They turn your generosity into spectacle. You respond by stepping back, not confronting. Confrontation would escalate. Distance corrects quietly. You begin to see generosity as currency that loses value if flooded. Scarcity sharpens appreciation. You give just enough to remind people you are useful, not enough to make them comfortable without you. Rome respects those who understand supply and demand, even in kindness. There is a moment when someone genuinely needs help. No calculation, no angle, just need. You pause longer than usual. This is dangerous territory. You help anyway, carefully, in a way that does not entangle you permanently. You feel relief and tension in equal measure. Humanity must be practiced with restraint here. Others notice. They always do. Your act is praised, your motives speculated on. You ignore both. Generosity that requires defense is already compromised. Over time, you refine the balance. You give enough to maintain goodwill across factions. You avoid becoming anyone's sole support. You spread favors thinly and strategically. This prevents dependency and discourages hostility. People who receive a little are less likely to attack than those who receive nothing. You also accept generosity from others with care. Accepting creates debt. You repay quickly, sometimes immediately, sometimes with something smaller that closes the loop. Open debts linger dangerously. You prefer clean accounts. The art lies in remaining useful without becoming essential. Essential people attract knives. Useful people attract invitations. You choose invitations. At night, you think about how strange it is to measure kindness this way. You remember simpler versions of giving. You do not mourn them. They belong to a different world with different rules. Here, generosity is not about abundance. It is about control, and you master it by giving just enough that people want you near, but never so much that they stop needing you to stay. The war happens far away, in places you will never see and names you will mispronounce the first time you hear them. Dusty roads, unfamiliar rivers, camps that smell like iron and exhaustion. You remain in the city, surrounded by marble and routine, yet the outcome reaches you faster than any messenger on foot ever could. Military success has a strange gravity. It bends conversations, shifts glances, alters seating arrangements. One morning you wake to find that nothing about your schedule has changed, and yet everything about your position has. People speak to you with a slightly different tone, not warmer, not colder, more attentive. You had no hand in the campaign. You offered no strategy, issued no command, risked nothing. That does not matter. Victory rarely belongs only to those who fight. It belongs to whoever can be attached to it convincingly. Your name begins to appear in sentences alongside words like stability and continuity. Someone remarks that the victory reflects well on the household. Someone else suggests it proves the strength of current leadership. You are mentioned without explanation, which is the most effective way. Explanation invites debate. Assumption settles faster. You notice the change in small ways. Invitations that once felt optional now feel expected. A meeting you would have observed from the edge now includes you closer to the center. A joke lands differently when you make it. People listen a fraction longer before responding. There is humor in how quickly people forget geography. The battle might as well have taken place in the courtyard for how intimately it is discussed around you. Everyone has an opinion. Everyone knows what should happen next. You listen, knowing that confidence increases with distance from consequence. You also notice who grows uncomfortable. A rival stiffens when the victory is praised. Someone who benefited from uncertainty now looks restless. Military success simplifies narratives, and simplification threatens those who thrive on ambiguity. You say very little. Saying too much would imply ownership. Ownership invites scrutiny. You let others draw connections on your behalf. This is safer. People trust conclusions they reach themselves more than ones they are given. The city reacts predictably. Crowds celebrate. Priests thank the gods. Coins are struck. Rome loves a win. It uses them to reinforce belief in itself. You stand where you are told, nodding, composed, aware that you are being absorbed into the story whether you consent or not. Inside the palace, the effect is sharper. Discussions about succession, policy, and alliances subtly recalibrate. The victory becomes evidence, evidence of competence, evidence of favor, evidence that this is not the time to disrupt existing arrangements. You feel the pressure ease slightly around you, replaced by expectation. Expectation is heavier. People begin to speak to you about the future more confidently. They reference the victory as if it clarifies paths that were previously uncertain. They ask what you think should come next. The question is not really about your opinion. It is about alignment. They want to know whether you will embody the momentum or resist it. You are careful. You praise the soldiers. You praise discipline. You praise Rome. You do not praise yourself. Modesty is safe. Modesty signals control. Those who appear humble after success are seen as steady. Those who appear ambitious invite balancing forces. There is a moment when someone congratulates you directly. The words catch you off guard. You respond graciously, deflecting gently. They seem satisfied. Congratulations are not about accuracy. They are about participation. Refusing them outright would disrupt the flow. You think about the people who actually fought. Some will be rewarded. Some will be forgotten. Some will return changed in ways Rome does not like to acknowledge. The victory will outlast them. Victories always do. Your standing continues to shift quietly over the following days. A door opens faster. A messenger waits. A conversation pauses when you enter. None of this is dramatic. It is cumulative. Rome adjusts like a living thing responding to pressure. You are aware that this elevation is conditional. Another defeat elsewhere could reverse it. A rumor could dull it. Nothing here is permanent. Still, you accept the advantage. Refusing advantage is suspicious. At night, you sit with the realization that power can move without you moving at all. That your position can rise or fall based on events you do not influence. That success, like blame, travels efficiently and lands where it is useful. You remain in the city. You walk the same halls. You speak the same words. But the war has changed you anyway, because you now understand that in Rome, distance does not protect you from consequence. It only disguises how tightly you are already bound to it. Your name starts appearing in places you did not put it, not carved in stone or stamped on decrees, but spoken casually, confidently, as if it has always belonged there. Someone references what you would want. Someone else insists you support a decision you have never heard discussed. The tone is assured. Assurance is persuasive. At first, you assume it is misunderstanding. People mishear. Messages blur as they travel. Rome is large. You correct gently when given the chance, offering careful clarifications that restore accuracy without causing embarrassment. This works briefly, just long enough for you to believe the problem is manageable. Then it happens again. This time, the reference is public. Your name is used to lend weight to a policy that benefits someone else entirely. You are praised for foresight you did not exercise. The room nods. The decision proceeds. You sit still, understanding immediately that interruption would cause more damage than silence. You realize that your name has stopped being personal. It has become functional. Symbols do not need consent. They need recognition. Your reputation, cultivated slowly through restraint and visibility, now travels faster than you can follow. People use it because it works. Attaching your name smooths resistance. It quiets doubt. It implies continuity and approval without requiring either. You begin to notice how carefully people phrase things. They rarely say you ordered something. That would invite proof. They say it aligns with your thinking. They say it reflects your values. They say it fits your vision. These phrases are impossible to disprove without sounding defensive. Defensiveness is fatal. There is an almost absurd humor to watching others argue passionately over what you believe while you remain silent in the same room. They cite your past actions selectively, assembling a version of you that suits their needs. You recognize pieces of yourself in it, rearranged into something more useful than accurate. You test resistance quietly. In private, you ask questions. You express mild surprise. You suggest alternatives. The response is always polite, always reassuring. Of course, naturally, we will consider that. Then nothing changes. The machine has already moved. You learn that once your name is useful, it stops being yours to control. It becomes a tool passed between hands that need legitimacy. You are not being misrepresented out of malice. You are being repurposed. There is danger here. If actions taken in your name succeed, your standing rises. If they fail, responsibility drifts toward you, whether you were involved or not. You are praised for outcomes you did not guide and blamed for consequences you did not foresee. Accuracy is irrelevant. Association is everything. You begin to adapt. You speak less about specifics and more about principles. Principles are harder to weaponize precisely, though people try. You avoid firm stances that could be easily borrowed. Ambiguity becomes armor. Still, it happens. Someone invokes your supposed support to silence dissent. Someone else uses your image of moderation to justify restraint that benefits them. You watch your name stabilize arguments like a weight dropped onto a scale. Balanced, settled, done. At night, you think about identity. How strange it is to lose ownership of your own intentions. You wonder when this began, whether it was inevitable the moment you became visible enough to matter. Rome does not elevate people. It converts them. You are careful not to publicly contradict those who use your name. Open conflict would fracture the symbol, and fractured symbols invite replacement. Instead, you work indirectly. You shift tone elsewhere. You emphasize nuance in other settings. You allow competing interpretations to exist long enough to dilute certainty. This is slow work, frustrating work, but it keeps you intact. Occasionally, someone asks you directly whether you approved something. The question is quiet, almost apologetic. You answer honestly but gently. You say you were not consulted. You say the matter is complex. You say you trust the process. They nod, satisfied, even if nothing has been clarified. You understand then that truth is not the point. Stability is. As long as your name provides stability, it will be used. You stop trying to reclaim it fully. That would require constant correction, endless clarification, public friction. Instead, you learn to guide its use subtly, nudging interpretations without challenging them outright. You become a caretaker of your own symbol. This is the cost of prominence in Rome. You are no longer just a person with thoughts and limits. You are an idea. And ideas, once useful, rarely ask permission before being put to work. Isolation does not arrive when you are ignored. It arrives when you are constantly visible. You stand in rooms filled with people who watch you carefully, waiting for cues, reactions, confirmation. Every glance feels intentional. Every pause feels observed. You are never alone, and that is the problem. Conversations orbit you without landing. People speak to you politely, warmly even, but rarely honestly. Words are chosen with care, filtered through what you represent rather than who you are. You nod, respond appropriately, maintain the balance you have practiced for years. Inside, you feel strangely untouched by it all, like sound passing through thick glass. The attention never stops. At meals, at ceremonies, in corridors that were once quiet. Someone always notices when you arrive. Someone always notes when you leave. Your presence changes the temperature of rooms, not dramatically, but enough that you feel it settle around you. People adjust themselves when you are near, smoothing edges, hiding doubts, presenting versions of themselves meant to impress or reassure. You miss casual conversation, the kind that wanders without purpose. Here, every exchange feels like a transaction waiting to happen. Even kindness arrives with restraint, carefully measured so it does not imply expectation or intimacy. You accept it anyway, because refusing kindness would create questions you do not want to answer. There is humor in the absurdity. You can summon a room with a word, yet struggle to find someone who will speak to you without calculation. You are surrounded by voices, but none of them sound like companionship. Laughter happens near you, not with you. Applause follows you, never beside you. You notice how often people speak about you in the third person while you are present. Not directly, not disrespectfully, just abstractly. They discuss your influence, your position, your symbolic value, as if these things exist independently of you. You are listening to your own outline, sketched by others. When you retreat to private spaces, they are never truly private. Servants enter quietly. Guards wait outside. Messages arrive unannounced. Solitude here is temporary and supervised. You learn to savor brief moments of stillness, knowing they will be interrupted soon. At night, the silence feels louder than the crowds. Without performance to maintain, your thoughts expand. You replay interactions, not out of anxiety, but out of habit. You wonder when the shift happened, when attention stopped feeling validating and started feeling isolating. There is no single moment, just accumulation. You begin to realize that being central makes everything else peripheral. People align themselves toward you, but that alignment creates distance. No one stands beside you unless invited, and invitations are rare. Proximity is political. Familiarity is dangerous. There are moments when someone forgets, just briefly, who you are supposed to be. A laugh shared unexpectedly, a comment spoken without caution. These moments feel startling and precious. They vanish quickly, replaced by composure and distance. You do not chase them. Chasing would reveal longing, and longing here is exposed quickly. You think about how many people know your face, your name, your habits. You think about how few know your thoughts. The imbalance feels heavy. You carry it quietly, because there is no audience for vulnerability in Rome. The city watches you. The palace watches you. Even allies watch you. Everyone is attentive, and no one is close. You understand now that isolation is not the absence of others. It is the absence of equals. You have influence, but little intimacy. You have recognition, but limited understanding. You are trusted with symbols and avoided with sincerity. This is not punishment, it is structure. Sometimes, you imagine stepping into the crowd unnoticed, listening without being listened to. The thought is comforting and unrealistic. You are too visible for that now. Even anonymity would feel suspicious, so you adapt. You find quiet within yourself. You learn to sit with your own thoughts without sharing them. You cultivate internal spaces where no one else has access. It is not loneliness exactly. It is containment. You are at the center of attention, surrounded by people who respond to what you represent rather than who you are. And in that center, you stand steady, composed, and utterly alone. Succession anxiety does not announce itself as fear. It arrives disguised as curiosity. Someone asks an innocent question about timelines. Someone else mentions health with forced casualness. A pause stretches a little too long after a cough echoes through a chamber. You feel it settle into the palace like dust, fine and unavoidable. Every delay acquires meaning. A meeting postponed becomes a sign. A letter unanswered becomes a rumor. A late arrival becomes a theory. You watch people connect dots that do not exist, then defend the picture as if it were inevitable. Rome loves a narrative, especially one that prepares it for transition. Illness becomes performance. A headache sparks whispers. A missed appearance triggers concern framed as loyalty. People do not ask how someone feels. They ask how long something might last. The difference matters. Health here is not personal. It is political. You notice how carefully conversations shift when certain names are mentioned. Some are spoken hopefully, others cautiously. A few not at all. Silence around a name is never accidental. It is rehearsal. Succession anxiety sharpens attention in uncomfortable ways. People watch elders more closely than before, counting breaths, noting posture, tracking energy. You catch yourself doing it too, then stop, unsettled by how quickly vigilance becomes instinct. No one wants to be unprepared. Preparedness looks like concern. Concern looks like loyalty. There is humor in how transparent it becomes. Someone praises stability while glancing toward the future. Someone emphasizes patience while quietly positioning themselves. Everyone insists nothing is urgent while behaving as if everything might be. You are asked questions that pretend to be philosophical. What do you think makes a good leader? How important is continuity? What lessons should be preserved? These are not questions. They are feelers, testing alignment, measuring whether you fit the shape of what people are imagining next. You answer carefully. You speak about institutions rather than individuals. You praise balance. You emphasize process. Vague answers frustrate no one and satisfy everyone just enough. Clarity would be dangerous. Ambiguity keeps options open. The palace begins to feel like a held breath. People smile, laugh, conduct business, but something underneath tightens. You sense impatience masked as respect. Respect becomes louder when it is anxious. Every public appearance is analyzed. If someone looks tired, speculation grows. If they appear energetic, speculation adjusts. Nothing resolves the question, it only feeds it. Rome prefers uncertainty to surprise. You feel the pressure indirectly. Invitations increase. Attention sharpens. People want proximity now, before positions solidify. They want to be remembered favorably when memories start being reorganized. You become a reference point again, a symbol people use to test their assumptions. There are moments when anxiety spills into absurdity. Someone interprets a delayed response as a signal of impending change. Someone else insists a minor ritual adjustment means something larger. You listen, amused and unsettled. The city is imagining its future out loud. At night, the palace is quieter, but the anxiety does not sleep. You hear footsteps, hushed conversations, the soft movement of messengers. Plans are being drafted that may never be used. Contingencies are multiplying. Rome prepares for everything except certainty. You think about how little control anyone truly has in this moment. Bodies fail on their own schedule. Time refuses to be managed. Yet everyone behaves as if anticipation might influence outcome. It will not. It will only shape reaction. You also think about how quickly loyalty might realign when the moment arrives. People who speak of devotion now will speak of necessity later. History will be rewritten with confidence. It always is. Succession anxiety changes the way people look at you. Some see possibility, some see threat, some see inconvenience. Their expressions flicker between calculation and caution. You remain steady, knowing that stillness is the safest posture when others are shifting. No one says the word aloud, but it hangs in the air, heavy and undeniable. Succession is coming someday. That knowledge alone is enough to unsettle everything. You understand now why Rome obsesses over continuity. Change is frightening, not because it brings chaos, but because it exposes how much of the present is built on assumption. Assumptions crumble quickly once the future demands clarity. So you wait, composed, observant, careful not to lean too far into any version of tomorrow. You watch anxiety ripple through corridors, reshaping conversations and alliances in advance. And you learn that in Rome, the future does not arrive suddenly. It is imagined to death long before it ever shows itself. Loyalty always sounds solid until pressure is applied. In calm moments, it presents itself confidently, wrapped in vows, gestures, and shared history. Under strain, it reveals its composition, and you discover how much of it was decoration. The fracture begins quietly, almost politely, with hesitations that feel reasonable if you do not look too closely. At first, people miss meetings. Perfectly understandable. Schedules are crowded. Then, they stop returning messages with the same urgency. Then, their language changes. Words like always and certainly soften into we will see, and perhaps no one announces a shift. Shifts never announce themselves. They wait to be noticed. You observe this with a growing sense of clarity rather than surprise. You have seen enough now to recognize the pattern. Loyalty here is not a fixed state. It is a reaction to conditions. When conditions change, reactions adjust. Pressure arrives in the form of uncertainty. Rumors thicken, decisions stall, futures feel less predictable. In response, people reassess. They do it subtly, telling themselves they are being practical. Rome encourages practicality. It gives people permission to abandon yesterday in service of tomorrow. You watch allies hedge. They continue to greet you warmly, but their eyes linger elsewhere more often. They ask questions that feel like inventory checks. They inquire about plans in a way that suggests contingency rather than commitment. You answer carefully, offering nothing that could be used as an anchor. Some people surprise you. They remain steady, even when it costs them. Their loyalty does not perform. It persists. You notice it in small things: consistent tone, unchanged posture, the absence of calculation. These people do not make speeches. They simply stay. Others reveal themselves quickly. They distance just enough to deny it later. They claim neutrality while aligning with alternatives. They insist they are only waiting for clarity, as if clarity were something that arrives unannounced and complete. You recognize this for what it is: exit strategy. There is a strange humor in how earnestly people justify their shifts. They speak of responsibility, of the greater good, of timing. They avoid the word loyalty entirely, as if saying it might summon expectation. You listen, nodding, understanding that explanation is another form of departure. Pressure clarifies hierarchies. Those who depended on protection scramble first. Those who believed in shared fate hesitate longer. Those who never believed in anything beyond advantage move fastest. Rome does not judge this behavior. It anticipates it. You feel the impact personally. Conversations feel thinner. Support becomes conditional. People who once stood beside you now orbit at safer distances. You do not confront them. Confrontation forces declarations, and declarations force choices. You prefer observation. Observation tells you more. There is a moment when someone you trusted hesitates in a way they never have before. Just a pause, just long enough. You see the decision forming behind their eyes. They are not choosing against you exactly. They are choosing for themselves. This distinction matters less than it should. You do not feel anger. Anger assumes betrayal. This is something quieter. Disappointment mixed with understanding. Rome trains people well. Survival often requires flexibility. You cannot fault them for responding to the lessons they have been taught. Still, something hardens inside you. Not bitterness, precision. You begin to categorize people more clearly. Those who stay when it costs them. Those who leave when it benefits them. Those who hover, waiting to see which direction the wind commits to. Each category has its uses. None deserve illusion. The fractures continue. They spread outward, visible only to those watching closely. Publicly, unity remains intact. Privately, alliances rearrange themselves like furniture moved in the dark. By morning, everything looks the same. It is not. You adjust accordingly. You rely less on promises and more on patterns. You place trust sparingly, and only where it has already proven resilient. You stop expecting loyalty from those who have never risked anything for it. There is a quiet relief in this clarity. Once illusions fall away, the landscape becomes easier to navigate. Fewer surprises, fewer disappointments, fewer questions that matter. You learn that loyalty under pressure is not about words or history. It is about who stays still when movement would be safer. And when the pressure finally eases, you remember who remained, not with gratitude exactly, but with certainty. Because in Rome, certainty is rare, earned, and never forgotten. Public worship grows louder, the quieter you feel inside. The city leans harder into ceremony, as if volume alone can patch invisible cracks. Incense thickens the air, chants lengthen, processions multiply. Every god is suddenly very busy, and every priest very confident about what the gods want from you specifically. You learn to nod at the right moments, to hold your hands just so, to look humbled without appearing uncertain. Rome loves certainty, especially when it is performed. You stand beneath towering statues that look suspiciously calm for beings allegedly responsible for storms, victories, and fertility schedules. Their stone faces never change, which is helpful. You copy their expression. Stillness reads as devotion. Inside, questions move faster than your lips ever could. You wonder when belief became obligation, and when doubt turned into something you must carefully fold away like contraband. The rituals intensify. Sacrifices grow more elaborate, the animals fatter, the prayers longer. You attend festivals that blur together, each one promising renewal, protection, divine favor, and a reminder of who paid for the banners. The crowd roars at the right cues. You raise your hand with them, palm open, eyes lifted. The gods are apparently very impressed by choreography. Privately, the silence feels heavier. When the chants fade and the priests retreat, you sit alone with thoughts no oracle can tidy up. You replay ceremonies in your mind, noticing how often the message aligns neatly with political needs. Victory is divine approval. Stability is sacred. Obedience is holy. It is remarkable how flexible eternity becomes when Rome requires it. You begin to notice small things, the way priests glance toward powerful spectators before finishing a blessing, the way omens are interpreted differently depending on who benefits. A bird flies left and it means caution. The same bird flies left again on a better day and it means destiny. You almost admire the creativity. Theology here is less about truth and more about timing. Outwardly, your devotion deepens. You fund temples. You sponsor games in honor of gods whose myths you can barely keep straight. You commission statues that look heroic enough to be convincing from a distance. People comment on your piety. They say it approvingly, as if piety were a personal trait rather than a performance with excellent lighting. Inwardly, the questions multiply. You wonder whether the gods are listening or simply being spoken for. You wonder if belief requires certainty or if certainty is the enemy of belief. These are not questions you share. Questions make people nervous. Nervous people talk. You kneel during rituals and feel the cold stone beneath your knees. The sensation grounds you more than the prayer itself. The physical world feels honest in a way the metaphysical no longer does. Stone is stone. Fire burns. Blood smells like blood. The rest feels increasingly negotiable. The humor arrives uninvited. You catch yourself thinking that if the gods truly demand this much attention, they must be terribly insecure. You imagine Jupiter checking attendance lists, frowning at empty seats. You suppress a smile. Smiling at the wrong moment could be interpreted as heresy, or worse, irony. The crowd believes. or believes that belief is expected. It becomes hard to tell the difference. You watch faces during ceremonies, searching for something genuine. You see awe, fear, boredom, ambition, calculation, occasionally something like faith. It is rare and fleeting, like a breeze through a crowded room. Your private doubt does not make you reckless. It makes you precise. You learn which rituals matter politically and which are symbolic noise. You attend everything, but you invest emotionally in nothing. Emotional investment is dangerous when the script keeps changing. At night, you think about the gods as stories rather than beings. Stories that explain chaos, justify power, soothe fear. Stories that once felt vast and now feel curated. You wonder if showing doubt would make you free or simply exposed. Public worship reaches a crescendo. More festivals, bigger crowds, louder prayers. Rome does not whisper when it feels uncertain. It shouts, hoping the noise will drown out the questions everyone pretends not to have. You stand at the center of it, radiant with devotion you no longer feel, surrounded by belief you no longer trust, and still you bow. Not because you are convinced, but because Rome is watching, and Rome believes that belief should look convincing above all else. Preparation becomes a habit long before it becomes a promise. You rehearse for a future that exists mostly in other people's conversations, a future spoken about carefully, as if saying it too loudly might anger the gods or alert rivals. Tutors return with lessons you did not request. Advisors arrive with hypotheticals that sound suspiciously like instructions, and scribes practice addressing you with titles that may never quite fit. You listen, nod, and store it all away like costumes waiting for a performance that might be canceled without notice. You are trained in posture first. How to stand when listening, how to sit when deciding, how long to pause before responding, so your words appear considered rather than rehearsed. Ironically, the pauses themselves are rehearsed. You practice walking into rooms that are not yet yours, greeting people who may one day bow or may one day pretend they never knew you. Even your handwriting is scrutinized. A future leader must write clearly, decisively, with just enough flourish to suggest confidence without vanity. The humor lies in how thorough everyone becomes about a future they cannot guarantee. You are instructed on how to react to crises that have not happened, how to address crowds that have not gathered, how to mourn losses you have not yet suffered. There is a lesson for everything except what to do if none of it comes true. That silence is notable. You notice how often people speak in conditional language. When you assume this role, if circumstances allow, should the situation arise, the phrases stack up like cushions meant to soften an impact no one wants to name. You become fluent in possibility. It is exhausting. You rehearse speeches privately, then abandon them halfway through. Too firm sounds dangerous. Too gentle sounds weak. You adjust tone, posture, pacing. You imagine applause, then imagine silence. You imagine support, then imagine the same faces carefully neutral. It is remarkable how quickly imagination learns to sabotage itself. At banquets, conversations drift toward the future in your direction. Not directly, never directly. Someone mentions stability, someone else mentions continuity. You sip your drink and pretend to be fascinated by the arrangement of fruit. You know the choreography, show interest without ownership, confidence without presumption, hope without hunger. Your days fill with preparation that feels oddly detached from desire. You are not sure whether you want the future they are shaping you for, only that refusing it would create more trouble than accepting the lessons quietly. Wanting too much is dangerous. Wanting too little is suspicious. You aim for something in between, a carefully neutral ambition. In private moments, you try to imagine a different life, one without rehearsal, one where decisions belong to you rather than to expectation. The thought is fleeting and impractical, like imagining yourself as a merchant or a farmer. Interesting, but incompatible with the furniture. The roles multiply. Future mediator, future symbol, future reassurance. Each one comes with its own instructions, its own set of behaviors to practice. You are told how to project calm in times of unrest, how to look decisive when you are uncertain, how to accept praise without appearing pleased. Pleasure is interpreted as entitlement. Sometimes you catch your reflection and wonder which version of yourself will arrive if the moment ever comes. The practiced one or the private one. You are not sure they are compatible. You suspect Rome does not care. You prepare because preparation is visible. It reassures others. It signals readiness, loyalty, patience. It keeps you relevant. Even waiting must be performed correctly here. Waiting badly can be fatal. There are moments when the future feels close enough to touch. A glance held too long. A title used experimentally, then corrected with a laugh. A meeting you are invited to observe rather than attend. These moments spark a quiet intensity. You feel your attention sharpen, your memory engage. Then the moment passes, and everything returns to rehearsal. At night, you lie awake thinking about roles rather than outcomes. You are less concerned with power than with timing. Arriving too early is as dangerous as arriving too late. History here does not reward enthusiasm. It rewards survival. You prepare because not preparing would be interpreted as a statement. You rehearse because rehearsal is safer than certainty. You study futures that may never unfold, learning scripts that might never be spoken aloud. And still, you memorize every line, because in Rome, even a future you never reach can be used to judge you. The shift does not arrive with thunder. It arrives with a message delivered too early in the morning, carried by someone who looks like they have not slept and does not intend to explain why. You know immediately that something has changed, not because of what is said, but because of how carefully everyone avoids saying anything at all. Rome is excellent at noise, but its silences are catastrophic. The event itself is simple in description and endless in consequence. A death, a betrayal, a failure that was supposed to remain theoretical. It does not matter which version people repeat, because the result is the same. The balance you have lived inside tilts, just slightly, then keeps going. Stability, that cherished illusion, cracks without ceremony. You watch the palace react like a living thing startled awake. Doors close, meetings multiply. Faces rearrange themselves into new expressions that suggest concern without admitting fear. The same people who spoke confidently yesterday now speak cautiously, as if the walls have developed opinions. Even the air feels different, heavier, like it is waiting to see who will move first. You are summoned, not urgently, but pointedly. Urgency would imply panic. This is something colder. You enter rooms where the furniture has not moved, but the hierarchy has. Someone sits where they did not before. Someone else stands when they once reclined. These are small changes, but in Rome, small changes are declarations. The story begins to fracture immediately. Everyone has a version. Everyone insists theirs is the correct one. You learn quickly that truth is no longer the goal. Control is. Whoever defines the moment defines what comes next. You listen more than you speak, because speaking now would attach you to a version that may not survive the afternoon. Outside, the city senses it. Rumors spread faster than officials. Markets hesitate. People glance toward the palace more often than usual. Stability is a performance, and someone has forgotten their lines. You can almost hear the crowd wondering whether to clap or run. The humor, dark and unwelcome, is how fast certainty evaporates. Yesterday's assurances are quietly retired. Yesterday's plans are referred to as misunderstandings. The same voices that praised order now praise flexibility. You realize how many pillars were decorative. Privately, you feel the ground move beneath you. Not dramatically, not enough to knock you down, just enough to remind you that nothing here is anchored as deeply as it pretends. You think of all the rehearsals, all the rituals, all the careful arrangements meant to prevent exactly this. They have failed, not because they were foolish, but because Rome has always been one incident away from chaos. All eyes turn, subtly, toward those who might benefit, toward those who might be blamed, toward those who might be removed quietly to reassure everyone else. You feel the attention settle on you like a weight, not accusatory, not supportive, just assessing, measuring how you fit into the new shape of things. You adjust instinctively. Your posture changes. Your words become more deliberate. You choose neutrality not as a moral stance, but as a survival tactic. The wrong enthusiasm would be remembered. The wrong hesitation would be interpreted. The event continues to unfold without you. Decisions are made elsewhere. Orders are issued in careful language that avoids responsibility. You realize how little control anyone actually has once momentum takes over. Power reacts more often than it commands. At night, the city does not sleep properly. Neither do you. You replay the day, noting moments that felt heavier than they should have. A glance, a delay, a phrase repeated too often. These details matter now. They will be used later to explain why things turned out the way they did. By morning, the narrative begins to harden. An official explanation emerges, polished and incomplete. People repeat it gratefully. Certainty, even false certainty, is comforting. You repeat it too, because refusing would place you outside the protection of consensus. Nothing is the same. Though everything looks the same, the halls remain marble, the guards remain alert, the rituals resume. But something essential has shifted. Trust thins, patience shortens. Everyone understands now that the structure they rely on can fail without warning. You understand something else as well. Imperial stability is not built on strength, it is built on agreement. An agreement, once broken, is difficult to repair. One event has done what years of tension could not. It has revealed how narrow the margin truly is. You stand inside the aftermath, steady, attentive, and fully aware that from this moment on, every step matters more than it ever has before. Adaptation is not dramatic. It does not arrive with a vow or a revelation. It settles in quietly, like a habit you did not notice forming until it is already permanent. You wake one morning and realize that the softness you once carried into rooms has been replaced by something smoother, harder to grip. Innocence does not shatter, it thins, then disappears, worn down by repetition. You move differently now, not cautiously, not aggressively, but deliberately. Every step feels measured, not because you fear missteps, but because you no longer waste movement. You have learned which gestures invite interpretation and which ones pass unnoticed. You choose the unnoticed more often than not. Conversations become shorter, not colder, just cleaner. You no longer feel silence to be polite. Silence is useful. Silence lets others speak first, reveal priorities, expose nerves. You listen with an attention that would have once felt exhausting. Now it feels automatic. You catalog tone, timing, what is said, and what is avoided. You stop assuming people mean what they say. Meaning lives elsewhere. There is a faint humor in realizing how little you miss your earlier self. The version of you that believed clarity was kindness, that honesty would be rewarded. That version would not survive here. You do not mourn it. You archive it. Rome is not sentimental about phases. Your face learns neutrality. Not emptiness, but control. You smile when expected. You frown when useful. You do not react quickly, because speed suggests vulnerability. People notice the change and interpret it as maturity. They compliment you on your composure, unaware that it is not a trait so much as a shield. You stop explaining yourself. Explanation invites debate, and debate invites erosion. You state positions briefly or not at all. You allow others to argue around you, exhausting themselves while you remain still. This restraint reads as confidence. In truth, it is efficiency. In private moments, you notice how your thoughts have changed. They are sharper, less forgiving, but also less chaotic. You no longer imagine best outcomes. You imagine likely ones. Hope has been replaced by assessment. It is not bitterness, it is clarity. You dress differently, subtly, fewer flourishes. Nothing that draws attention without purpose. Even luxury becomes strategic. Opulence attracts envy. Restraint attracts trust. You learn which one lasts longer. There are still moments when something is lost. A laugh that comes too late. A thought you choose not to share. A reaction you suppress because it would complicate things. These moments register briefly, then pass. You do not linger on them. Lingering is dangerous. People begin to approach you differently. With caution, yes, but also with respect. They sense that you are no longer pliable. You are not unkind, just unavailable for manipulation. This frustrates some and reassures others. You accept both reactions as confirmation that the adaptation is working. You notice how rarely you are surprised now. Events unfold, and you recognize the pattern early. You are considered perceptive. In truth, you have simply learned to expect fracture. Stability is temporary. Power shifts. People pivot. Knowing this removes the shock. At night, when the palace settles into its artificial quiet, you reflect briefly, not with longing, but with inventory. What did you learn today? Who revealed something unintentionally? Where did you remain silent when silence mattered? These reflections are practical, not emotional. You sleep better this way. The innocence is gone completely. Not stolen, not corrupted, just outgrown. In its place is restraint, practiced and reliable. Restraint keeps you alive. Restraint keeps you relevant. Restraint lets you move through rooms without leaving fingerprints. You are not cruel. You are not warm. You are precise. And in Rome, precision is the closest thing to safety you will ever have. Legacy arrives not as a question, but as a pressure. It settles in the background of your thoughts, persistent and inconvenient, like a sound you cannot locate but cannot ignore. You notice it when people speak about the past with certainty, naming figures as if they were inevitable rather than assembled by circumstance and good timing. You notice it when statues are cleaned more carefully than living people are treated. Rome remembers selectively, and that realization is unsettling. You begin to understand that legacy is not built at the end. It is assembled quietly, decision by decision, omission by omission, long before anyone pretends to summarize you. Every choice now feels like it might outlive you. Not in truth, perhaps, but in narrative. Narrative is what survives here. People ask questions indirectly. What kind of stability do you value? Which traditions matter most to you? How you view continuity? These are not philosophical inquiries. They are probes. Everyone wants to know how you might be explained later. You answer carefully, offering phrases that can be interpreted generously from multiple angles. Ambiguity ages better than conviction. You walk past monuments and realize how aggressively they simplify. A man who ruled for decades becomes a single pose, a single inscription. Victories are carved cleanly. Failures are omitted entirely. You wonder how much effort it takes to erase complexity, and how much of that effort is happening around you already. The humor finds you here, dark and dry. You think about how many people are desperate to control how they will be remembered by a city that barely remembers anyone accurately. Rome forgets details first, then forgets names, then pretends forgetting was intentional. Immortality here is mostly a rumor. Still, you cannot avoid the question entirely. You consider how you are spoken about when you are not present. You consider which stories circulate easily and which ones stall. You notice that restraint, once merely protective, now looks like character. Silence is mistaken for wisdom. Caution is mistaken for depth. You let these misunderstandings stand. Correcting them would require effort and honesty, neither of which would survive long. In quieter moments, you ask yourself what you would want remembered if you had the luxury of choosing. The question feels indulgent. Rome does not ask what you want, it asks what it needs. Legacy here is a function of usefulness, not virtue. You watch others chase remembrance loudly. They sponsor games, commission buildings, attach their names to anything that will hold still long enough. Some succeed briefly. Most fade quickly. Excessive self-importance has a short shelf life. You file this observation away. There is a strange intimacy in realizing that you cannot control this entirely. You can influence tone, shape perception, reduce damage. You cannot guarantee outcome. The city will decide what version of you it prefers, and that version will outlast the rest. This is not comforting, but it is clarifying. You think about survival versus significance. Rome praises both, but only one is required. Plenty of significant figures did not survive long enough to enjoy their reputations. Plenty of survivors are remembered vaguely, if at all. You lean towards survival. It feels less romantic, but more practical. At night, you imagine a future historian, tired, biased, working with incomplete records. You imagine them guessing at your motives based on second-hand accounts and political pamphlets. The image is almost comical. Your entire interior life reduced to a footnote or a misinterpretation. You find that this thought bothers you less than it should. You realize that legacy is not about truth, it is about coherence. Rome prefers stories that make sense, not stories that are accurate. You adjust accordingly. You aim for consistency. You avoid extremes. You let others project meaning onto your restraint. There is no grand conclusion to this reflection, just acceptance. Legacy will happen whether you participate or not. The only choice is how much you fight it. You continue as you have learned to continue, measured, observant, selectively visible. If Rome remembers you, it will be because you fit into a story it wanted to tell, and if it does not, that may be the quietest victory of all. The realization does not arrive as wisdom. It arrives as exhaustion finally making sense. You have spent years watching people grasp for control, tighten their hands around titles, laws, armies, symbols, believing that if they hold firmly enough, the world will stay still. It never does. Rome moves regardless, grinding forward with the indifference of stone underfoot. What survives is not control, it is endurance, and even that is borrowed time. You think back on every moment that once felt decisive, every meeting framed as pivotal, every argument dressed up as destiny, most of them dissolved into compromise, delay, or quiet reversal. The ones that mattered rarely announced themselves. They slipped by in corridors, in pauses, in moments when someone chose not to speak. Power here never behaved the way it was described in speeches. You have seen emperors celebrated like gods and removed like inconveniences. You have seen authority handed down with ceremony and stripped away with paperwork. The illusion was never that power made you untouchable. The illusion was that it made you permanent. Endurance reveals itself as the real currency, the ability to remain standing while others collapse under their own ambition, the ability to absorb insult without reacting, loss without flailing, uncertainty without spectacle. Rome rewards those who last, not those who shine brightest. Bright things burn out quickly. Even so, endurance has limits. You see it in the aging faces of men who once ruled rooms with a glance and now struggle to command attention. You see it in policies quietly undone by successors eager to leave their own mark. You see it in monuments that still stand, but no longer mean what they were built to declare. Stone endures longer than people, but not longer than interpretation. There is a faint, bitter humor in realizing how much effort is spent pretending otherwise. How many lives are devoted to the idea of lasting forever in a city that treats forever as a suggestion? You almost admire the audacity of it. Almost. You consider your own path with an honesty you did not have earlier. Not every choice was brave. Not every silence was noble. Many were simply necessary. Survival required flexibility. Endurance required restraint. You did not master Rome. You adapted to it. That distinction matters. Power, you see now, was never something you held. It was something that passed through you, briefly, conditionally, like a current that could shift direction without warning. You could influence its flow for a time. You could never command it indefinitely. The city continues regardless. Markets open, temples fill, crowds gather for new reasons, names change, faces replace faces. Rome does not pause to commemorate transitions. It absorbs them and moves on. This is not cruelty. It is scale. You walk through familiar spaces and feel neither triumph nor bitterness, only clarity. Whatever role you played was temporary. Whatever authority you exercised was contingent. Whatever endurance you achieved was measured against forces far larger than intention. There is relief in this understanding. Control was always an impossible standard. Endurance is demanding, but honest. It asks only that you remain aware, adaptable, and alive long enough to matter briefly. You think of those who chased dominance relentlessly and burned out spectacularly. You think of those who said little, waited long, and faded quietly into footnotes that historians still debate. Neither outcome feels like victory. Both feel inevitable. What remains is the knowledge that nothing here was ever fully yours. Not the power, not the praise, not even the consequences. You moved within a system older than you and indifferent to your personal narrative. This does not make your efforts meaningless. It makes them finite. You stand with that truth and find it steadying rather than frightening. Endurance was never about winning. It was about lasting long enough to choose your exits carefully. And even that, you now understand, was temporary. Rome endures. You do not.